Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by Trainer Road. I'm Coach Jonathan Lee, and to my right, we have Amber Pierce from Cannondale Pro Racing and Trainer Road.
Yeah, hi everybody.
Good to have you, Amber. Our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everyone.
And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
We've recently been talking about the lighting in this room, and when you saw Nate coming in, I think he was talking about the bags under the eyes. So,
Chad and I were comparing, but Chad's are much less. I didn't see him.
You can join us on the podcast live on YouTube. It's usually every Thursday at 8 a.m. Pacific, with some cases where we say that we are not going to be on at that time. We announced that the week before. And then you can see the said lighting and everything else. You can let us know if we need to improve the lighting in the room. So these are the important details. And along those notes, actually, another very important bit of news. Nate Pearson, you are on Instagram now.
I am. Somebody on Instagram said, "Wow, you look younger there." Probably because of the lighting.
The lighting,
here.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you're at npearson99.
Yep.
And
Spelled
Pearson
like
is
a pear.
spelled like a pear. Nice.
Pearson.
Yep.
99.
Yeah, and people can go on there. It's been funny to see. So first of all, I don't know if you had a bet
Can't
with somebody.
tell them what I posted so
No.
far.
Yeah. I want.
Right.
I actually don't have a plan to run through every post, believe it or not. So
Well, there's two.
yeah. But you'll get behind the scenes looks at really kind of what Nate does. Nate, it's funny. We were actually in the process of copywriting, and we were talking about the hosts of the podcast. And we didn't know a professional way to really say this on the site because we were looking at it.
I can't wait.
Nate's like the guinea pig, right? Like, and because the fact that Nate's
wouldn't
always
call it that.
experimenting.
No.
You're always
Okay.
experimenting.
So, what I'm trying to figure out what to put.
Hold on a second. He's always experimenting, is he not?
Self-experimenter?
Yeah,
Maybe
self-experimenter.
there's a more flattering
They're not even
term.
experimenting. I'm going to go less flattering.
Okay, no experimentation.
So I'm not sure
ever,
what my
actually.
Instagram's going to be. What people have said is pretty much, in general, just let Nate be Nate.
Yes.
Like show Nateisms. And I do so many things that are like pseudoscience or like not, like barely.
But never experiments, by the way.
No,
Don't
they're
do
not
that.
experiments because they're not like it's not. I'm not doing an experiment. I'm just doing something that has little evidence, but not to the level of evidence where like I want to go on the podcast and tell everyone, hey, you should do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, they're not. I never said they were scientific. They're just experiments. My son also experiments a lot.
But I'm
Nothing
not
is
even
scientific.
experimenting. I'm just doing it.
Yeah.
Little baby follow-up studies, just independent
not
follow-up
studies.
studies.
You just
No. It depends on it. So sometimes it's like I don't even want to say it here because it's expensive. But some things I do, it's like they might be brand new and they don't have enough.
Yeah.
Where you don't want to just be like, hey, everybody, do this, and I just do it. So if you look at it, don't do what I do the whole time.
but go there because it's interesting.
And I almost had. I told these two this, but I'll tell you this. I had almost an Instagram fail this morning.
Yeah,
I went on my. I took a picture of my body fat on my scale this morning and put it on Instagram on the story.
Oh, no.
And the scale was reflective, and I was naked. But luckily, I caught it before I posted it, and then I zoomed in right on the body fat
You would have
amount.
broken
I'm
some
glad
brains.
you said body fat amount right then.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
posted that. So
Yeah.
that was close. Watch out for reflections. That's gotten celebrities chat.
Lesson
so.
learned. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
And mirrors. Stay away from mirrors. It's also
Yeah.
yeah. Just a rule of thumb. Yeah. So if you like Nate, which a lot of you listeners do,
Or if you hate me, there's going to be people
Yep.
sending me hate messages
Totally.
because I say things that a lot of other people don't believe. But
yeah, you'll get your
fine.
fair share of trolls. You can go find that. Chad, you can find Chad at Chad does not have Instagram. That's his handle.
That's
No,
just it.
he doesn't have Instagram.
Oh, somebody asked me for spy shots of Chad. I've already taken some. You don't realize it.
Comforting.
They're like every beer photo ever.
Yeah. Well, you know I'm doing those, but yeah, those beer photos are definitely going up.
Cool.
There we are.
I'm,
And
off,
then
I'm off the beer then.
yeah, oh nice. Look
No,
at that.
I'm not.
Wine photos,
That's not enough.
old-fashioned photos.
I mean, you say that.
Amber's on
Didn't
Instagram,
say those
Amber
words.
Malika.
Yep, Amber
AM
Malika.
Yeah, Malika. Forgive me. Yeah, and Malika
Yep.
is the Malika part.
Yep.
And then I'm on there as Lee Jonathan _. So yeah, it's good fun. You can see it on there. Also, of course, follow Trainer Road. We post all the things that we create. Yeah, we post all the things that we create, whether it's a live stream of this podcast, whether it's a race analysis video, and the race analysis videos actually live there independently on Instagram as well. So if for some reason you don't want to, or just want the convenience of being on Instagram and seeing the race analysis videos, they're on there. All the different blog posts that we write, feature updates, all that stuff. You should head over there and give us a follow. And it's just at Trainer Roads. That's pretty straightforward. let's get into Ben's question. He's involved in one of the coolest organizations here in the States, at least for cycling. It's pretty cool stuff. He says, "Hi, folks at Trainer Road, 5-star podcast every week. My question is very selfish, but may be applicable to many. I'm a complete beginner, and I'm looking to get faster. I was a NICA volunteer coach, which NICA, for those that don't know, for those that are like outside the States, is National Interscholastic Cycling Association, I believe is the acronym. And it's also analogous with the high school league or high school and middle school mountain bike leagues that exist here in the United States in different areas. And they've grown immensely over the past few years. It's pretty great. So lots of kids on bikes. So he says that I was a NICA volunteer coach last year and got dropped at almost every practice. I'm slightly overweight at 230 pounds at 6 foot 2 inches. My last FTP ramp test, I came in at 212 watts. I mainly ride mountain bikes, but I train on a Cannondale System 6. Check it out there. On a Kurt Kinetic road machine. I have limited time to train with a wife and 4 kids and working 50 to 60 hours per week. I'm looking for a deep dive of what I, as a beginner in cycling, should do to get faster. I've listened to hours of your podcast, so I know a lot of the answers that Chad will recommend, such as consistency, sweet spot base. Even though everyone like says that like that's like a recommendation that we hand out, and I'm not sure that that's the recommendation we hand out. It's pick the right plan. Now it's really easy with Plan Builder, right? So, and it'll walk you through where you need to go. And then he also mentions low volume, which we'll talk about that in a bit. And then sleep, nutrition, fans, etc. What I'm wanting is more or less a checklist for a beginner following one of your plans for the first time to get the most out of it. Also, I want to have a goal to work towards, and right now my goal is not to get dropped at my NICA practices. Those kids are fast. I understand that. I think that's a good goal, but I want to know when setting goals for cycling, how should a beginner pick a target to shoot for? So we're going to cover the goals part later here, just so you know when you're listening to this. But it says, I will be subscribing again to Trainer Road in hopes of getting faster in the off-season. I would love to update you with my progress. Point number 1, Ben, don't just get faster in your off-season, get faster year-round. That's one big thing. Kind of like strength training and everything else. Like I think a lot of people look at, they train with structure when it's off time. Yeah. And I mean, it's probably really hard, Amber, like when you get into like pro racing, like to fit in the training with the travel and with the racing and everything else.
Yeah, then becomes almost a race to recover the best.
Yeah, that's your training is just recovering better than anybody else, right? But for the majority of us, even with really busy schedules and everything else that we have, we should flip that switch of thinking of structure as being like our off-season thing, and then once we get into the season, we just kind of let it be what it is. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, then performance always drops, and we're always chasing better performance. So that's just point number 1. But we built up a checklist of sorts. These aren't necessities. These aren't like if you don't do this, you will not succeed. But these are suggestions that we would give, like you said, for anybody, whether it's your first time, honestly, or not, going through this, how to get the most out of the training that you're
Some
doing.
of these sound like the basics, but man, the basics like are the foundation.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If you don't do these, just everything becomes a little bit harder.
Yeah. I mean, people get really excited about marginal gains, but
Yeah.
you can also make just really big gains
Yeah, exactly.
By doing the simple
by
things.
just doing the basics.
You wax your chain, but you're sleeping 5 hours a night.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Great example.
It's like,
Exactly.
you could probably improve your sleeps. So
Yeah.
who wants
Right.
to take this?
I don't know.
We can all chime in.
Yeah. Nate, actually, do you want to start off on the first one?
Sleep at least 8 hours a night. Maybe more. How much did you sleep when you were riding pro?
As much as possible.
Like was 8
8 to 10.
Yeah, 8 to 10
hours.
I hear
when
that a lot
could.
from pros is 8
Yeah.
to 10.
And napping. Napping is awesome if you have the time for it.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on prioritizing sleep above
Yeah.
pretty much everything.
So we're keeping this little checklist focused on performance, right? Mm-hmm. And this will certainly help performance. But in terms of something that just helps your overall well-being, kind of stepping outside of this, the sleep thing is huge.
Yeah, and you're going to correct a lot of things afterward that aren't going to benefit or respond the same way they would if you would correct your sleep first, or at least improve your sleep habits.
Motivation and discipline increases with sleep.
Everything
Huge.
does.
When you have those 5 hour nights,
Everything improves, I should say.
and then there's that McDonald's breakfast, you're like, I just need it today, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that, or
yeah.
something that's unhealthy. Where when you sleep, like even getting stuff done at work, which is very important here. So it's sleep.
Yeah,
That's pretty
100%.
much my point.
It's something really, side note on this really quick. When I went to go see Jade Ashari in Bend to work on my knee, I think he's at Rebound Physical Therapy. A lot of people ask where that is. That's where it is. He, but that's not sponsored, by the way. I paid a lot of money for that. So,
Very not free.
yeah, very not free. But that was actually one of the first questions he asked me. It was like, how much sleep do you regularly get? And like we were just trying to approach a knee issue, right? But just to further prove the point that it ties into all things.
Impacts recovery.
Oh, a ton.
Healing.
For sure.
Decision making.
On the nutrition side of things, man, that's just a minefield of personal opinion out there. And also it's tough in terms like there's a lot of scientific things, but a lot of perhaps kind of assumptions that have been stretched far based off of that. It's a minefield, but some safe principles that you can probably focus on. Semi-safe. Focus on whole foods. What do we mean by that, Nate?
Foods that aren't processed.
Yeah.
Or minimally processed. So if you cook if you roast your broccoli, like probably okay. Or you roast your potato, you can eat raw potatoes. But if your potatoes are like, I don't know, made into some kind of fried cracker that's with everything stripped out, or your rice is stripped of everything that's processed. So try to stay away from that.
Reduce deep fried foods. I think that's a fair thing that it'll help, right?
If anyone ever, I'm going to say this out here, free year subscription to Trainer Road if you ever get a picture of Chad eating fried food. Then you can send it to me.
Whoa, that's a big bounty.
Deep fried food.
Chad's going to have paparazzi.
Deep fried, yeah.
You can have
sauteed like scallops in a pan. That's not, I'm counting. I'm like French fries.
Deep fried. Popeyes.
Yeah.
Everything
at Popeyes. Yeah. Almost.
I want to live in a world where like Chad's trips to Whole Foods are being captured by paparazzi.
Yes. They're just people. Go.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And then reducing sweets.
Yep. You don't need to eliminate them.
Easy one.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Some dark chocolate. I think both of you two bros, are you a big dark chocolate fan?
I love
Amber?
chocolate.
Yeah, I don't even know. I would just say refined sugars,
Yeah.
less than sweets.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't rank dark chocolate in there,
Off the
especially if the
bike.
cacao's high.
Because
Yeah.
Sugar helps
Oh,
on
no,
the bike.
On the bike. This is a whole different conversation on the bike.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's just in moderation, it's fine. I think some people
absolutely.
can
All
go
these things in moderation.
crazy. Even if it's high cacao, you can eat 4, 5, 6 bars a day because some of it's really good.
Yes. And then reducing alcohol, I think it's fair to say also that's not going to do you benefits.
Yeah, and we're trying to be realistic here because, I mean, normally we'd want to say eliminate fried foods, eliminate sweets, eliminate alcohol. But realistically, we're not asking you to aim quite that high.
Sure.
Right. You need to make sustainable changes. And,
Yep.
and going cold turkey on a lot of this stuff is just, it's too much to ask of anybody.
And if you are going to eliminate any of those things, make it an incremental process. It happens over time.
On our product management off seat, Amber said I could drink 2 bottles of wine. Was it 2 bottles of wine?
Yeah. It was definitely 2 bottles
How
of
much
wine.
was it?
In one sitting?
No, she said
She just wanted you to pass out.
she just said that
I talked to a nutritionist at one point and asked about alcohol. And apparently, according to this nutritionist, the research at the time said that up to 2 drinks in a day is not going to adversely affect your training. I know.
Anecdotally.
I don't advocate
Where the 2
that
bottles come from?
I'm
specifically.
just joking.
Okay.
Anecdotally, too, didn't you see some high professionals, you don't have to name names, but high-level pros having a drink a night?
World champions.
Yeah, world champions.
Yeah.
I think on this, it's probably not improving I know it's not improving your performance, but there is the idea of like, especially if it's before sleep, so it's not impacting your sleep, that relaxing a little bit like makes it easier then to reset and go hard later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys all, right?
Well, that and
Fully
I
agree,
think
yeah.
I think also in some of these cases, going back to the idea of sustainability, the stress of avoiding something, or the the guilt and the self-loathing that comes with eating something that you think you shouldn't eat. It's the stress and the guilt that get you probably worse than whatever it was that you ate.
Right.
So
100%.
The raised cortisol. on
exactly.
that.
So just the relaxing isn't just a result of the alcohol, but also just being a little bit relaxed with the restrictions that you're placing on yourself.
And you have to be okay breaking that restriction, or else sometimes you break it and then you're stressed about it the whole time.
Yeah.
And that makes it
That
double
makes
That's
it
worse.
actually
so
more
much
damaging
worse.
than the thing
Yeah.
that you took in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's just comforting to hear that some people at the highest level don't have to be these perfect
They're
people
not.
on nutrition and can still perform.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really, it's true. We're all humans.
Absolutely. And just to hit home one more point on this, like Chad, you pointed out, we didn't say eliminate, we said reduce,
Yeah.
right?
Reductions, yeah.
So-
anything that moves you in the right direction.
And start with what's easiest for you to reduce. Like start there, because then you start getting those good wins and it's motivating, and don't jump
Momentum.
in with the hardest thing
Yeah.
off the bat.
Did you have a bad New Year's Eve with old fashions?
No, I think I've got a bit of a head cold, so I didn't drink all that much.
Okay.
Yeah. Next one. This is one that can certainly help. We're going to get into some low hanging fruit in a bit too, but this is one, fuel 3 to 4 hours, and really you'll find your own window. You'll probably find like an ideal point. For me, it's actually closer to like 2.5, I've found, depending on the meal. But like fuel 3 to 4 hours before your workout, if possible, with something that's like a carb-centric meal. In other words, give yourself some fuel. And something that you mentioned, Amber, that's super important is don't diet on the bike.
Yeah.
Like, because that's the temptation, especially like if you're starting in this case. And Ben, it looks like you want to shift body composition too,
Right.
Right. So there's a huge temptation to just basically do the work and starve yourself and try to fast track your way toward wherever you want to be. But if you're looking on tips, like a checklist tip of basically something that will help you complete the plan and move through it, this is definitely something that will help it. For sure.
Before, during, and after you're training on the bike, you want to really be fueling with carbohydrate. And then the rest of the day, that's where, other meals off the bike, that's where you really want to focus on nutrient density. And if you feel like you need to create a calorie deficit in the day, don't create that deficit by just riding your bike and not eating anything. It's tempting to do that because you're out of reach of the fridge. It seems easier, but what then happens is you're not going to get the performance adaptations that you're chasing, or at least not as quickly. And sometimes it just makes you ravenous the rest of the day. It could put you in a bad mood. But fueling the performance will give you a really good training session, which will build over time into great performances on the bike and the goals that you might be chasing. And then, overall mood is better. And
you're less likely to, I think, then afterwards to binge. I've done that before.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Where it's the same thing with regular diets, which we might talk about, but you reduce your calories so much, and then you're nailing it for like 2 weeks, and then you do 3 Popeye sandwiches in a row, and then it's like you're off it, right? And then you start that, and it just is like a little like snowball, and it gets worse and worse.
Yes.
Yeah, and we mentioned fueling 3 to 4 hours before, which obviously isn't realistic if you're working out in the morning. So just recognize that what you're eating for dinner is going to fuel tomorrow's workout.
And then making sure you're taking in something on the bike while you're training.
For sure. There's an element, so that breeds a lot of discipline. Number one, because it's harder to eat on the bike. And you have to train yourself to do that, even just the habit portion of it, because you're focusing on riding on the bike and you don't think about it. Then number two, training your gut to be able to handle it. Then number three, outside of that, if you create that habit of discipline when you're riding on the bike and doing that, and then you control the outside of that when you're talking about your diet, and that's where you start to focus on nutrient density, whole foods, everything else. That breeds a lot of discipline, and we've talked about consistency being, which is one of the things that you mentioned here already, Ben, in this case. But consistency is like a common trait that we see with people that are getting faster. Discipline falls directly in line with that. If you're not
consistency with everything too. It's not just consistency across workouts. It's consistency with your sleep habits, your nutrition. I mean, everything that impacts your performance.
Yeah, so even though that seems like it's like nutrition, and that's like kind of we're setting it over here, it absolutely breeds the same discipline and those good habits that'll help in every aspect of your training. So, and it's probably one of the hardest ones to do, right? In terms of controlling the eating habits and the binging and everything else that people want to do.
Binging, yes.
For sure, right? Like that's hard. Yeah. No.
Well, you meant just it's hard to eat. I'm like, nope.
Nate has no problem with that.
Most people have no problem eating.
Sure. Yeah. Exactly. So it's a good point to work on for sure. All right. So
let's have Chad say this next one.
This is huge. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So I'm just going to read it. Nail your low volume plan before you move to mid volume. So it's important that before you progress the challenge, you're undertaking the first challenge or accomplishing the first challenge to its fullest extent.
Oh yeah.
That's it. So we get a lot of people who are so eager to, I need to be faster. I got this faster on the low volume plan. They just assume the mid volume plan is the next logical step. And to some extent that's true, but a lot of cases there's improvement still to be had in the low volume plan, and that low volume plan is probably still working for them. I mean, in a lot of other ways that they don't recognize beyond performance. Maybe that's all their schedule can accommodate. Maybe that's all their rate of recovery will accommodate, things along those lines.
There is so many people. I just saw somebody in the forum. They're new to Trainer Road. Okay, I'm going to do Sweet Spot Base High Volume 1, Sweet Spot High Volume 2. Like, if you've never done indoor structure training, it is a whole different world compared to outdoor riding. Even if you ride a whole bunch outdoors, just try one block on low volume, see how you do, then go to mid volume and see your compliance.
Totally.
And then when you start missing things, back it off. Rather than, I personally think when you start to I saw another YouTube video on this, and the person missed a whole bunch of workouts and stopped them short. Still had performance improvements, But I would say before you start like lowering every workout, where you like every day you're just like lowering it and ending every workout early, switch to a lower volume like mid volume or low volume, get a recovery day, and then hit your intervals on those other days.
Agreed. Completely. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a common tendency if you're new to it to look at your current volume, and you alluded to this, but just to be very explicit with it, look at your current volume, look at the training plans, and in many cases, like a lot of people are like, well, then I should follow a high volume plan. But it's important to remember this is purely structured time.
Yeah, they're looking at
a different experience.
Probably exclusively hours, not necessarily the composition of the training. So they're maybe riding 8 hours a week, but they're just kind of noodling, doing a bit of tempo, riding, coasting the downhills, maybe even coasting some of the regular riding. And it's very different from what you'll encounter when you train indoors.
And you're probably not doing threshold for 20 minutes at a time.
And that's the other thing, the intensity and the quantity of the quality.
Chances are you have some sort of like bias in terms of what you see. Like if you were to actually have a full report on how much was structured in the ride that you did, of course, the structured portion sticks out in our mind. But when we kind of let all the other stuff melt away and we don't think about it, but when you look back, it compromises, or it composes a much smaller portion of our training time than we think if you're just riding outside.
Yeah, and a common giveaway, and this is by no means a criticism, but is the first thing I get from a rider is I put in this many miles per week, or I did this many miles last year.
Yeah,
it's almost meaningless. It tells me you've been on the bike a lot, but I don't know what happened on the bike.
Yeah, true. That's so true. Also, I think people think like you do a drop ride and it feels hard, so therefore you think then, okay, I can jump into these 2-hour workouts because I do these 2-hour drop rides, right? And different. It's not. It's totally different. And there's a lot of have you guys ever seen a power file after you do like a drop ride? And it really wasn't like the best workout. It was hard, but it wasn't the best workout. It happens in races too. Rather than, I think if you probably did a lot of the Trainer Road workouts, a VO2 max or a threshold workout over unders, you'd have a better performance increase next time than right. Although in the drop ride, there's all the tactics and handling.
There's absolutely a place for that.
There's totally benefit.
For sure.
Yes, I'm just saying that compared to like over unders, probably get more threshold rating.
It's not 1-to-1. They don't serve the same purpose.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Amber, you were going to say something about focus, I think.
Oh yeah, I think to your point, Nate, like when you're in a group ride, your focus is very different than what it is if you're on a trainer and you're doing an indoor workout. I mean, like in a group ride, even or just going out and riding by yourself. I mean, depending on what you're doing, I'll take the group ride as the example. Like you're touching on all of the systems. Like you're touching on threshold, you're touching on aerobic systems, you're touching on anaerobic, you're touching on VO2, but you're not necessarily focusing in on any one of those. And then when you're really focused on a specific system and a specific interval, maintaining that focus for even just 45 minutes to an hour on the trainer, you won't believe the difference in that between just going out and noodling for a couple hours, even 3 hours on the bike. It's a very different beast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's also worth saying that now that you can do Trainer Road workouts outside or inside, like yesterday I did Carter, which is like 45 minutes of like zone 2 basically, right? Is what was flipped it outside and went and did it outside yesterday. And it's still a very different experience. It's not riding out, it's structured workout and structure is different. So, recapping, definitely start low and nail that with 100% precision, just like you would like in a video game or something else, you know what I mean? And then step up.
And you think that like, oh, I'm leaving so many watts on the table for the season. But think of it like a 4 or 5 or 6 month thing rather than, because you start too high, maybe you get through the first one, and the second one you start to like fail, then you burn out, and then you stop structured training,
and then the season starts,
and then exactly, and then you drop off. And I see this over and over and over again. And I just want to tell people, if you would have been low volume the whole time, and then like we said, like add rides on top of that, and then take them away once you get too tired, that's a much better approach. Or whatever volume it is, just start there and then add to that rather than jumping up and then taking them away and then burning out and crashing.
I think there's something to be said on motivation there too. When you're really nailing things, you feel great about yourself. And when you start to really fall short of what the plan was on the day, it can really affect you psychologically, affect your confidence, affect your motivation. So, I mean, really just, nail the basics.
Yeah, it's hugely important. We're going to talk about motivation later too. And it dovetails off that really well.
Next one, this is something that I see every year around wintertime. Cooling. We've mentioned this plenty of times. The Lasco Performance Series fans are the ones that we have and we use.
They should send us checks.
They totally should.
At least some
right?
free fans.
The Wahoo fan too is a good option to have because it's similar in terms of that style fan, but it's oriented like a portrait rather than landscape, which we're a portrait shape on the bike, not a landscape shape.
Makes sense.
So it makes sense for sure. But the point is, get a fan that's really productive, and maybe not just one fan. If you can, if you go onto Nate's Instagram, you can see a post that he did where he was like, you were showing off your position that you want to have on your bike. And some of the comments were like, holy cow, you have so many fans. I think you have 2 or 3, right?
I have 2.
2, yeah.
But
and making sure that you have adequate cooling goes so far to helping you. And I see riders every year, they go onto the trainer, right? They jump onto the trainer. They're usually like the sort of rider that's like, I never ride inside. And there's some sort of like pride associated with that, right? And they ride inside and they don't ride with the fan and it's miserable. And it's like, yeah, well, of course it's miserable.
There's no airflow.
There's no airflow at all.
Yeah.
And we don't realize how much airflow, even on a hot, still day outside, how much airflow is there and how much evaporative
A good
cooling is
indication of
working.
how well you're cooling is the sweat that's amassing or not underneath you. I mean, if you got piles of sweat or literal puddles of sweat, you're saturated in it, your clothing's soaked, you're probably not cooling as well as you could.
No, and this will vary from person to person. But when I'm training, even doing a really hard workout, I don't have my arms may start to glisten and something like that, but I do not have sweat dripping off of me when I'm using my fans.
it's all going to matter of relative humidity.
Yeah,
so if you're in
for
Florida,
sure.
it's 100%.
Humidity,
but
your sweat rate.
Yeah. Your evaporative, how well the
Because
water
if it's
can
100% around you, it's going to be tough.
Exactly to do it. But in general, you just if you're sweating a bunch and you put on a fan, you're not sweating as much. You're cooling more.
Yeah.
To that Lasco fan, I think it is worth 15 Walmart box fans.
Oh, yeah.
I used to have. I think I've literally. In college, I took every fan in our big house that we had. There's probably 6 of them, had them all pointing at me, and it's not the same as one of the Lasco
No,
fans.
it's not. In fact, my bike classes back in the day, we had these little 8-inch. I can't remember the brand. I don't want
Tornado?
That might have been it.
I forget. I remember those though.
Yeah, they weren't strong enough, and I thought they were, and I thought they were concentrated enough, and then I upgraded to this particular fan. I was like, oh boy, I blew that.
Yeah,
that's a huge performance limiter. I mean, people got faster, but they could have gotten faster. I truly believe that.
Oh yeah, because these
I was in those classes.
these fans are made to push a huge amount of air volume across a surface, right? Because they're made for drying out flooded
floor.
basements or stuff like that. So, and as a result, you get a ton of airflow. So that's huge. Don't shortchange yourself on that. And there's discussing this a bit more. Yeah, there's a time and place to if you're getting ready to go race in Central America or something where it's super hot and humid and you've been doing workouts just in a cold environment and extremely, with really effective cooling, it'll come as a shock, right? So you can work that in, and we've talked about this plenty of times. If you search Ask a Cycling Coach heat adaptation, you can find an episode where we talked almost exclusively about that, and we've mentioned it plenty of other times. But there's the time and place to do that is to work it in strategically, not on your hard workouts. Because if you are cheating yourself on cooling, you're not able to work as hard. So you're capped, so to speak, if you can kind of visualize that. And if you're capped, you're not going to be making the sort of improvements that you really should be making with that sort of workout. Mm-hmm. And it's crazy how even seemingly easy workouts get so hard when you're not adequately cooled.
I did a Baxter in the shower, and I think my heart rate was average 175 or something, and it should by that time it was 125 for the same workout. Yeah. It was insane. It was so I could not finish it. Amber, did you ever do any heat training?
Heat acclimation?
Yeah, actually Yukon has a heat acclimation lab. So I've done some, and when I was doing it, I was doing specifically just for the acclimation. So I'd go in and do, we would run continuous body temperature, and it would basically, you would have to ride pretty hard, ramp up your body temperature to a certain point, and then just hold it for 30 minutes. Oh. And it's shocking. It did not take a lot of wattage. It did not.
Time.
And then, but it just wasted me. It's it's really helpful when you go and race in the heat later, but it's
hard during.
It's really hard.
How did they measure your body temperature?
Got it.
I know where this is going.
Did you swallow something or not swallow?
There were
something?
two options. Yeah, you
Okay.
could swallow something or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that would be kind of cool.
How do you even ride a bike like that?
That's it happens. Yeah.
Well, that's what the runners would do. That
Okay,
is-
that
yeah,
makes more
and then
sense.
you can swallow something as well. So
yeah.
Yeah, I remember seeing something with Matt Lieto doing that in Hawaii because they're trying to follow his
remember that too,
his
yeah.
core body temperature
Mm-hmm.
and to see how it would raise in Hawaii because he would have problems.
Yeah.
That is something kind of cool. We should.
Yeah, actually
I think
it
something
is.
kind of cool and see. I'd
I
like
know
to
some
see-
people.
I know you do. That's what I'm.
Yeah, that'd be.
I want to know
make it
that
happen.
these are one-time use sensors.
Yeah.
But to save money, guys. Sorry. So I'd be interesting to see the difference too, like between with fans and without fans, like on the same kind of like aerobic ride and a hard ride. And then Jonathan, on your Instagram, you have been going into the sauna a lot afterwards, and to see. Like to track what your core or what your internal body temperature is, because that's what we're chasing, right?
Yeah.
Raising the internal
Raising
body
the
temperature.
core, yeah.
What that is while you're riding, and then when you get in the sauna, like does it like how fast does it dip, and then does it come up, and then how high are you in the sauna?
Yeah,
Wouldn't that be
it's-
cool?
And how
Yeah,
that changes over
fascinating.
weeks
Yeah.
of training.
Yeah.
Or even like a 10-day acclimation protocol.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be awesome.
Ooh, okay.
Let's do it.
Can you, Amber? Can you ask people?
Oh yeah.
Please, a large quantity of those items, not a restricted quantity. But with that, it's interesting because perception, as we know, can always be a liar, so to speak, right? Like we try, but when I get off the trainer after doing like a sweet spot workout and then I go into the sauna, it doesn't feel like my core body temperature raises a whole lot. Like I don't feel internally like I'm suddenly starting to cook. And this is like a hot sauna. I don't know if the temperature's right in that thing, but it's a hot sauna. So it's like, we're like 140 Fahrenheit is where it's at. And I don't feel like I'm cooking, but my body certainly starts sweating more. So this is like one of those things where if you're just trying to remove cooling and just kind of go by feel and hope that it's working out, it's tricky because I bet my core temperature isn't exactly the same, going from the bike over into that environment with having a fan on me. So once again, cool your workouts when you're focusing on making gains. That's
I bet
important.
it. I mean, you're doubling the temperature because it's probably 70 in the office.
Yeah.
And you're going to 140, unless it's wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
No, there's a difference with the type of
Infrared.
Infrared, yeah.
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 But we can check that out later. But
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
I definitely pour sweat.
It's
there.
crazy. Yeah. And I'm not an eager sweater, so to speak. And man, that changes things.
Can I
Okay.
do the next one?
Please, Nate.
Okay, entertainment. This is important. If you just set up Trainer Road and just stare at it with nothing, you can do it, but these things make the RPE and the time fly by a lot more than not. So it depends on the type of ride you're doing. If you're doing aerobic or under, some people can do this with Sweet Spot. I can't. Chad's a different story. Listen a few podcasts back.
I don't think I'm that different, but I believe I just think
very
a lot
special,
of people.
Chad.
I like that idea, but I do think a lot of people can do what I do.
Okay. If you can do what Chad does, power to you. If you're brand new, maybe try this and then graduate to the Chad level. Because Chad's the high volume plan of entertainment.
It's like a PhD.
Yeah, I don't even call it entertainment so much as distraction. Just anything that, I don't know, productive distraction. That's my term.
Okay, so if it's
Yeah.
sweet spot and above, this is what I do. And again, where your line is could be different for you, and just play with it. Up tempo music, that is important. I know for Chad it's not important, but
Tchaikovsky.
Depending on intensity, it is.
Okay.
VO2 max and hard stuff.
And music
I
that you
need
like.
that motivation.
music that one person likes is not necessarily music you like.
Totally.
It can actually like destroy me in a session if I'm listening to like death metal. I don't like death metal, and I've done some playlists where like that will come in, and I'm like, oh, I hate it. Change.
My watts are broken.
Yeah, exactly. And then, so have the music, and then if you want, I like to also have like first-person race footage that's muted on a separate screen or on the same screen if you're on desktop. So the ones that I like are race analysis videos. I'll watch like Urine Pete's like full videos. I've this is egotistical, but I've watched my Cat 5-2 finishes because watching my 17 minutes of my finishes.
It's just race
You
analysis.
get to pick yourself
stuff.
apart and
Well,
kinda
I
see.
don't like doing that, but I just like, I remember either when I did well or when I did bad, and the times that I did bad and I just barely lost, I'm like, you're not stopping on this interval.
yeah.
No possible way. Cape Epic on YouTube, they have really super good footage of every stage of Cape Epic. They have a person on an e-bike with a camera in the peloton watching it. So you follow the pros as you go through.
Yeah,
And they
it's
have helicopter.
I think we've mentioned this before. I think it's the best race coverage of any bike event I've seen.
Yeah.
It's impressive. And it's not like on some major network. It's just... Yeah.
And it's probably the least, it's not close to anything civilized, right?
Yeah, it's probably the most difficult.
Yeah.
Like,
Difficult
it's
to do.
amazing that they figured out how to do it. Yeah.
NorCal Cycling.
Yes.
Awesome. And he just started a new channel that's NorCal Cycling full race videos that you can watch. He's putting up like his full uncut. There's no commentary, but when that's 50 minutes, you can watch that for 50 minutes.
Nice.
And it's very nice. And he actually has good strategy, so it's good to watch him.
One thing to add to this really quick is that ours are organized into different playlists. So if you want to see like the ones where we have critique and analysis, you can do that, but then we also have a full race video playlist just to make it easy, because that's one thing that's hard is if like Red Bull TV is famous for making it hard to find a lot of the cross country mountain bike races, and it's a pain, and sometimes I just don't watch it because I don't want to go through the labyrinth of clicks, but in this case it's easy.
Cross races. I've thought of myself as
Matthew.
a few times.
Nice.
And they have great men and women's coverage on Flow Sports and NBC Sports Gold, and Red Bull doesn't do cross. Red Bull does cross country mountain bike. That was great
Yeah,
coverage.
they do cross if you are outside of the United States. If you're inside and probably other countries, but I know inside the U.S. they're on there, but we can't see them. They're geofenced.
Okay, so that's what I personally like to do. And then on aerobic rides, watch TV or movies. I don't do any music. Just set up erg mode. Just finished season 2 of You. That was great. I think I watched most of it on the trainer. Super fun. Again, that's going to be whatever you like. But on those two, there's certain TV shows I can't watch on the trainer aerobically, and some I can. So just because you can't have one, try to get something that's more interesting. If it's really slow, Mr. Robot, there's too many like pauses and like long camera shots for me to be interested in it for 90 minutes to 2 hours. Any other entertainment things you guys can think of?
I've
Well,
mentioned before the incentivizing yourself with the show. So right now we're starting from the beginning through the end of Game of Thrones. That's a lot of episodes, and they're all about an hour long.
It's a lot of training.
It is, but it's only for particular rides. So it's all our butter burners, which we're reading rides. So I'm struggling with that, trying to decide how to make that work.
Do both at once, dude.
Yeah, I think I can. That's
You have two eyes.
It's a little too dialogue intensive, and there's a lot of names, and it's actually kind of a hard story to follow unless you're paying attention. So
Have you not seen Game of Thrones before?
I have, but we watched it. We kind of half watched it, so you only pick up so much, and you get to season 7, and it's like I have no idea who that is. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Either way, we wanted to watch it yesterday, and we were both a little too hungover, so we didn't get to watch because we couldn't get on the bike.
Yeah.
So it's solely when we're on the bike, which we really want to know what happens next, so it gets us on the bike.
Yeah, that's great incentive for it. I think it's key to once again stack the odds in your favor. This isn't just for beginners, and this is like one of the big things you can do with it. Like all of these things, just stack the odds in your behavior. And if you do decide that you want to take some of them out, like we talked about, there may be like a benefit to training with cognitive load and increasing that strategically to helping you in your racing. But if it's compromising your ability to complete your workouts, that's not doing you any favors. So like pad things first, right? Put the bumpers up if you're bowling, so to speak.
Sure.
Yep.
And then get it all down, and then you can start taking them
I
down.
feel like that's one of those marginal gains that
Sure.
adding 20 watts for
Absolutely.
FTP makes it way.
Yeah.
You're going to
way
be a
easier.
faster
Yeah,
cyclist.
exactly.
Yep.
If you're consistent, right? Because if you
sure.
dread getting on it, it's no good.
Yeah. For me, I pick usually the same stuff, but my threshold's probably a little bit lower with watching things. And like you said, and just reiterating this, everybody's going to be different, and you may have something that you really like to use, and you should use it if it works.
Yeah.
That's the point behind it. So whatever that may be. Okay, next one, and this is huge, and we're kind of spoiled here at the office for this in many regards, but eliminate and reduce all of the obstacles that would keep you from getting on the bike. So that's putting the bike on step back even further. That's even having the trainer set up, right? Or having the space to set up the trainer. And then having your bike set up on the trainer and everything else. And with through axles and adapters, there are plenty of things that could go wrong when you do that, right? So if it is possible to keep your bike on the trainer, it's huge. Kit is another big thing. If your kits are dirty and you just don't wash them right after you train, just put them in the wash and take care of that sort of thing. Then you get into a point where you end up either delaying because you have to wash a kit or find a new kit, or you reuse the kit and then saddle sores come around and it's just a bad mix. So
Don't do that.
don't do that. Have your kit ready. Bottles is another thing. Like if you're putting mix in there,
Even if it's not mixed, if it's just water and ice, having those like prepped, and ice will last a long time in the fridge. Having them prepped so you just walk down and grab them, it just eliminates an extra like couple minutes and it makes it easier to start. I actually like putting my kit on my bike with my socks, like right there. And my, like just, it's almost like a transition.
I have it set up so all I have to do is walk downstairs. I don't have to grab anything. I just know if I go downstairs, everything I need to get me on the bike is right there and ready to go.
it's funny. Like the work is like super important to do, right? Like the training, and we understand that. But when you add up 6 of these small little obstacles, it can completely throw off a training session, right?
Yeah.
So it's super important to have them in place.
Another thing I would say is sometimes I don't know what TV show to watch, and I fall in the trap where I might sit and I gotta look at it, and then I sit in my chair and I start typing, looking, cross-referencing Rotten Tomatoes and stuff. Do that during your warm-up. Like just when you just get on the bike and start pedaling, and then look around, and you get a lot less picky, and you're like, that's fine. I'll watch V-Wars, which isn't very good, but it's kind of dumb. Yeah, it's not good, right? It's not good. But I've done that. I'm just like, okay, I'll just watch this, and at least I get through my session.
Yeah. I mean, and if we're going to talk about like basics versus marginal gains, the most basic thing you can do is get on the bike.
Right?
Right. So whatever, if there's any obstacles getting on the bike, prioritize those things, because just getting on the bike and pedaling that's where you're going to gain absolutely the most.
Yeah. For sure. There's something to be said too, that this is one of the reasons why I like the rollers. Just pair with my power meter. I don't have to worry about plugging things in, or I don't have to worry about anything like that. I genuinely just grab my bike and put it on. And it's a nice, easy thing, right? So if you have a setup and it's excessively complicated, look at ways to be able to minimize that. Another fan thing, sorry, this is kind of going back to cooling, but also on this. We have, and Tucker, we'll have to find the Amazon link for this, but it's like basically a small plug that you just put into the wall.
Cheap little remote.
Plug the fan into it, and super tiny little remote, but it's just an on-off switch. Yeah. And that's another thing that way you can keep your fan plugged in, and you don't have to worry about plugging that in every time, and then you don't have to worry about getting off the bike to turn it off and on. Yeah. Just have that little remote right in place.
I love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't imagine working out without them.
Yeah,
it's such a simple thing, and I'm completely dependent on it now.
$8.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think I bought a Bluetooth power strip.
Yeah.
And so then, and the trainer and the fan and my computer are all plugged in on it. So I just hop on the bike, hit a couple buttons on my phone, and then everything turns on and I'm ready to go.
It's easy. And then the last thing that I would say on that too is having something like, once again, talking about having everything set up, having a desk is really helpful. I think most of us have that Wahoo desk. Yeah. There are probably plenty of options. You could use a music stand, something else, but having something where everything is set up once again.
I used a baker's rack for a while, a little rolling baker's rack.
Yep. Yeah.
I know somebody who uses a music stand.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're great.
Shortly after we moved into our house, we found this really awesome Craigslist warehouse sale. So we went and bought all these old school desks that we set up downstairs with the trainers, and then we got this giant industrial fan. So it's
Nice.
pretty awesome. So I mean, you don't even need to go buy new stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff that's available out there that just set up your own little system.
For sure.
Yeah.
Last one we can touch on here is caffeine. I feel like this is something where if you're taking in caffeine like habitually, that sort of thing, just normal, like you drink your coffee in the morning, drink it whenever. Recognizing, I guess, the effects of that on not only your training but also your sleep and just like the whole daily schedule, I think is an important point, right, Nate? We were kind of talking about this and how it affects your training and then sleep and everything else like that too.
Yeah. Do you want to do it or you want me to do it?
I was just going to point out that it can get a little easy to lose sight of the fact that caffeine does impact your sleep. And you may think that I'm drinking caffeine at noon, but that's not a big deal. But if you're ingesting 500 milligrams of caffeine, half-life being what it is, you're still going to have quite a lot in your system if you're going to bed even at 9 o'clock that night.
And 500 would be
it's a big dose.
It's a big dose.
Yeah.
But as far as training, it's a suitable dose.
So caffeine, lots of research on it. Generally safe unless you do really high doses, which can kill you. So
really high.
Yeah, but don't do like powders and stuff like that, because you can mess up the dose. So 1 to 2% increase in performance, I think, is pretty shown. It can also reduce RPE at the same level of performance. Caffeine was so effective that for a while it was banned in the Olympics at certain levels in your bloodstream. Then they took that away. Again, before noon, So if you're working out at 8 in the morning, and you take some coffee or maybe even a caffeine pill, which probably isn't very good long term, but it's probably going to be out of your system depending on how much you have still. I talk about this at the big races like Leadville when I'm taking like 800 milligrams before a race. I'm a big person too, at 193 pounds or so.
Point.
And a half. At night, I'm still like, I can still feel it, right? Because that's a whole bunch of caffeine for my system to process. So
And
just
it
be
doesn't
aware
just
of that.
disappear. It's got to dissipate. That takes some time.
And me not drinking coffee, when I take caffeine for races and gels, anything else like that, man, like it.
You get going?
Yes, and it's extremely hard to sleep though, and even so, like before my races or during my races, I usually take in those like 100 milligram Marten gels that they have, and I take those in, or 100 calories, I think is what the gel is, and I can't remember how much caffeine they have, but I usually take those in, and I'll take it like before the race, and then I'll take one throughout the race. And that has a profound effect on the next day. So if I have like a stage race or anything else like that, I really have to think about it. And for me personally, once again, you just have to find out how you're going to use something like this.
Yeah, and if you're doing a local crit in the afternoon or a twilight criterium or something, and you're pounding the caffeine, don't plan on sleeping very well.
Yeah, it's not going to work well. And even like in a stage race, a lot of people, we always talk about prioritizing your races. I even have to like prioritize the caffeine intake for like the specific stage a lot of the time, because us amateurs usually race later in the day than the pros in stage races a lot of the time. So then, you get to a point where for a non-consequential portion of a stage race, you took a bunch of caffeine, then you sacrifice the next day's performance. So definitely something to figure out and kind of test. So I'm going to do a super quick recap of that. So first of all, sleep, get good sleep. 2, focus on whole foods and reduce the stuff that isn't necessary and probably isn't going to improve your performance when you're talking about nutrition.
Or your health, really.
Yeah, right. In terms of timing your food, make sure that you come into a workout with sufficient stores on board. Carb-centric meals are great before then and during when you're training on the bike and after. Then nail the low volume plan before you move up and start low, and then you can ride as much as you want on top of that, and then just start working in more structure as you can. Cooling, make sure you cool yourself enough. Make sure you have the entertainment that's right for the sort of intensity you're doing and also what you enjoy. Eliminate obstacles that stop you from getting on the bike, and then figure out things like caffeine and other substances that you take in like that. Okay, setting goals. Let's talk about that. It's appropriate for this time of year too.
This is my favorite segment.
So
I think we're gonna get through one question today. I just know what's coming.
I think so. All right. On the setting goals portion, let's talk goals first, and then let's get into our New Year's resolutions that we had last year, and ones that we're going to do for the coming year.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure who those first comments are, but
this is Amber. Do you want to kick it off at least in terms of like I guess let's just talk about goals in general and how you think it's probably best. We're talking about cyclists in general here, so but the principles probably translate to all throughout.
Yeah, so I think when most people are setting goals, it's usually improving on something that you've already tried or trying something new. And so I think a really easy way of, well, it's not necessarily easy, but I think setting that big goal and then breaking down like what are the things that you're going to need to get there. So if your goal is to qualify for something, is there an FTP number that you have to hit? Okay, in order to hit that FTP number, what do you have to do? And then you just start backing out each of those. So there's an FTP component, but then there's also travel and logistics component. So make a list of all the things that you need to have happen to make that goal happen. And then each of those things is going to require 5 to 10 other things. And each of those things is going to require 5 to 10 other things. And really breaking it down into the smallest chunks. So some of the things like lifting your FTP, it's not something you're going to do in a day. But if you can break that down into small things that you can do every day, that's about how far you want to break down every goal. Break it all the way back down into one thing that you can do each day that's going to get you toward that goal. So I think just breaking things down into like really simple bite-sized pieces, so to speak, is a way to go.
In business, they call that, I think, the 6 whys. And either Toyota or Honda does this. And when they have an issue, they ask, like, well, so they had a car crash. Well, why did that happen? Well, this part failed. Well, why did that happen? Well, it got from the supplier. Well, why did that happen? And they keep asking that, and then they find out, well, somewhere very early in the process, this is the small thing that they can change. In the same way, like, well, how can I guess it would be 6 hows here. How can I get my FTP to 300? Well, I need to do this much workouts per week. Well, how can I do that?
Exactly.
Well, I have to be able to schedule my time to have this. Well, how can I do that? Well, I'm going to need to now talk to my boss and ask him for this time to end work at 4 p.m., right? And then all that sort of stuff.
Make your bottles the night before. And,
Exactly, yeah, and be really time efficient. Where when you just say FTP of 300,
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
it's easy for that just to fall away.
Right, exactly. You have to break it down into things you can do every day. And for Ben, Ben's wondering how to set some goals for himself, and he mentioned not wanting to get dropped. Well, there's a lot of reasons that you get dropped. I mean, certainly lifting your FTP is going to help with that, but there's other things. I mean, what's going on in your head right before you get dropped? Is how you're talking to yourself on the bike contributing to, there might be moments where you could dig a little deeper, but you don't because you're really being hard on yourself in that moment. So are there mental skills that you can work on? Is it maybe just a technical section? Are you getting dropped on descents? Or, is it a technical climb and the technique is actually a component of what's getting you dropped? So identifying multiple things that you can work on. So it might not just be the fitness. That will absolutely help. But then again, is it the intense part? Is it the climb? Is it the descent? So picking apart where those selections are and how you can address those. And then once you've identified a couple of the key skills where you think you could really make the most, you move the needle the most, then start breaking those things down. So I would identify some process goals and then break those down into things that you can do every day.
Yeah. And you have another point down here that I think is super important, that you aim for progress, even if it isn't linear, right?
Yep.
Like you think step 1, 2, 3, 4.
Progress is never linear, guys.
Yeah, right?
It just isn't.
Yeah, but you aim for progress toward that outcome goal.
Exactly. So, I mean, we all like to think that you get out of it what you put into it. And really, in the big picture, ultimately you will, but it's not going to be linear. And I think that can get really frustrating sometimes, because sometimes you'll just have these huge gains and you're improving by leaps and bounds, and that's awesome and it's really motivating. And then there are times when it just feels like you're just beating your head against a wall for just a tiny little bit, but keep the faith and just keep moving forward. So just remember that the point is progress towards your goal, understand that it's not always going to be linear, but just keep moving forward.
Yeah, perfect. Should we get into resolutions on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, let me.
Oh yeah, Chad, you got some stuff, Dad?
Yeah. Slow your roll there, brother.
Nate's so excited.
Okay. So I'm not going to reiterate everything Amber just said, but I am going to apply it to one particular method of setting your goals.
Cool.
So, and I've over the years, there's a few ways to go about it. This one seems to resonate with the most coaches, and it definitely resonates the most deeply with me. It's in terms of effectively setting your goals. I mean, you can't just put a goal up there without these considerations. I feel apply in all cases, and everything Amber just said. It's like, that's what was wrong with that. That's what she specified there. So it's the acronym is SMART, and each one of these is meaningful. So the S is specific. So let me just run through them. It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And she just capitalized on each of those, I think. In terms of being specific, you can't just say, I want to raise my FTP. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to raise their FTP, and that's not a good goal to shoot for. I mean, any increase in FTP, and boom, you've achieved a goal, but not a very good one. So say I want to raise my FTP by 40 watts, 10%, whatever. Mm-hmm. Return to the FTP I was at 2 years ago when I was very competitive.
Sure.
So something specific. And then it has to be measurable, obviously. So you can't just say, I want to lose weight. I want to say, I'm going to lose 5 pounds of body fat, or I'm going to reach 9% body fat, or I'm going to shift my body composition to, in any case, it has to be something that you can measure on a frequent basis. And not only is it measurable, but you have to measure it. And we'll get to that later, because that's one of the many balls I dropped. And then achievable. So you may want a 400 watt FTP, but is that achievable? Maybe a 330 watt FTP is a better stepping stone along that path, and getting 400. Either way, make it achievable. Mm-hmm. Relevant. So considering your goals, and I'm particularly guilty of this, and I think this is just kind of an overshoot sort of thing, or I can't distill down what's important from all the things I want to do. So I end up doing all these things in the pursuit of becoming a better bike racer, but a lot of these things don't necessarily make me a better bike racer. And an example would be like a pure climber pursuing big strength goals.
Yeah, sure.
It's not relevant. And then finally, time bound. You got to put a date on this stuff. So you can't just say, I want to win a national title, because that's a good goal, mind you, but you have to say, I want to win a national title in 2021. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. It gives you a sense of urgency.
With all that in mind. And like I said, everything Amber just mentioned is like, that was specific, that was time bound, that was measurable.
I've been to so many business things about SMART, and SMART, like for the last probably 20 years, everyone loves SMART. Mm-hmm. SMART, I think, has to be paired other stuff, just because
It does. It's not everything.
Yeah, because what I think in the business context, what they think is you set this for your company, and then internally they're going to organize and figure out how to get this done. Because a lot of this stuff, it's not a guide of what to do, kind of like what Amber did.
Yeah, and
but a lot of it too is out of your control, like how much you can raise your FTP and stuff. So I like for like a wake, instead of saying my SMART goal is to lose 10 pounds by March. And that's probably achievable and measurable and all that sort of stuff. I like the idea of I won't eat Popeyes once between now and March. Like that's easier for me to control. Or I will get on the bike 4 times per week. That's kind of like breaking it farther down. So you can still do SMART, but you got to back it up with, in my opinion, with what is the process goals to reach your outcome.
Now, I'm getting to that too. We'll definitely talk about that. This isn't everything. And if I have one criticism about Nate's goals, and I've got one for each of us, I have several for me, but I'm just going to limit it to one, is that he serves himself a lot of softballs. I think they're too general and they're too achievable.
Right.
And that's one of them. Saying, no, you get to where you need to get and you do it quite well, but I don't think the way you establish goals, if I were coaching you, we would definitely do it differently.
Yeah.
Let's go. Okay. We'll get
into
it. I'll
Should we
defend
go
myself.
into
The gauntlet has been thrown.
Sure.
Yeah,
do
it's not saying your way's
2019
wrong.
first.
It's just
I
different.
do want to make one comment real quick about the measurable aspect of this, because I think this can be a slippery slope. I think it's really important to have measurable goals because you can track your progress, but I also think it's a little bit of a trap because there are some really significant things about improving yourself as an athlete which are very qualitative.
Sure.
And they're very difficult to measure in a quantitative manner. And so there's this saying that what gets measured gets managed. But then what ends up happening is we tend to focus on the things that are easy to measure.
That's a good point.
Right.
The things that are really easy to quantify, but those aren't necessarily always the most important things. So a lot of being an athlete is psychological. There's a lot of qualitative things that are a little bit harder to measure quantitatively.
Become a better bike handler.
Right.
I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Maybe measure some of that, but I'm more comfortable in a pack now, and I am less... I have less like mental energy inside of it. I just feel natural and feel more comfortable moving up.
And I think
that's huge, right?
Right.
So that
Massive.
probably saves me 30 watts during a race.
Sure.
It's
But I can't
have
unbelievable.
no number.
Yeah, there's no power meter
specific
to
Right.
show that.
And I think that's where something like a training journal can be really, really helpful. Just keep the journal, because what you can then do is flip back 3 months ago. What was the race that you did at the beginning of the season versus the end of the season? How did you feel after that race? You might be talking about, wow, my positioning was really on point. Or, whereas earlier in the year you were really freaked out and struggling with it. So there are ways of measuring progress, or at least gauging progress on qualitative aspects of improvement. So don't, if you're using the SMART model or you're worried about making sure that things are measurable, don't limit yourself to quantitative goals.
And also recognize that your quantitative goals have to be flexible.
Yep.
I mean, if at some point along the way you get sick and you were on that trajectory to achieve that improvement in FTP and now it gets sidetracked a little bit, you're not failing to meet that goal because you had to realign it.
Yeah.
One thing I think that we should discuss before we get into the resolutions is we haven't explicitly, at least in this episode, we have in previous ones, but kind of stated the whole concept of process versus outcome. And there's numerous different ways to phrase that. It could be short-term, near-term, or short-term, long-term, whatever else you want to say. Nate, how would you define process and outcome?
Process are things that you can control. Outcome is things that you can't control. So Jonathan winning national championship, he honestly can't control that.
Right.
Somebody could show up, an
be
ex-pro,
faster.
and just destroy him. But he can control how many times he works out before then.
Yeah.
You can manage pretty much the entire process all the way up to the intended outcome.
How many days he gets before the race gets there, the equipment he uses, riding with his race wheels before nationals.
Important things. As we come
Right.
to
So
know.
you could reframe that outcome goal as a process goal by saying a process goal would be putting yourself in a position to win. And all of the process goals that lead up to that.
Yeah, I put it so when I look at process and outcome goals relative to achieving a sub 50-minute time trial, one example was I had to grow my sweet spot intervals to 30 minutes. And this is just sweet spot, so obviously I'm going to have to go faster, but I wanted to be able to do this in position. So I got the position down, I got the long durations down, now I'm going to work on bringing the power up. That's part of that process. And then my outcome was a sub 50, but one might actually handle the other. I mean, bringing myself, enduring the process, bringing myself up to a point where I can ride a sub 50 might inherently bring me
a sub 50.
a win. So if the outcome goal in that case is to win district titles, my process leads me to a high enough FTP and a high enough power output to actually achieve an outcome goal, even though the outcome goal may not have been all that important. It may have been more about the process. It may have been more about just getting a sub 50, but a sub 50 actually nets a championship. So there's a lot of overlap.
Yeah. Well, and while time trialing is specifically kind of measurable, and perhaps you may know the course and know the demands of everything else that you need to have for that, you can find that in a lot of forms of racing, even something as dynamic as mountain biking.
Absolutely.
So let's get into our 2019 resolutions. And we'll do an on.
Wait, can we say a few more things on?
Oh yeah, sure.
Just when it comes to goal setting, we've talked about. I don't want people to fall into the trap of all or nothing goals. I do recognize that all or nothing goals can be very motivating. You know, I'm going to win a national championship and that's it. There's no two ways about it. I either do it or I completely fail. That's a dangerous trajectory. I mean, maybe you pull it off, and maybe you can do it one time, but it's probably not a sustainable approach to establishing goals. Trying to do that perfect execution of everything leading up to the intended outcome.
Hitting back on what you said, Amber, talking about the goal is progress towards, or it's progress toward the goal. That's the objective.
Yeah, and every bit of progress is a minor win.
Oh yeah. And that's where journaling and everything else comes into. We're running ourselves in circles here, but that's where those journals and everything else can really help you see that progress, because it can be hard on the big day when you don't achieve that goal. It can be hard to feel like all that hard work was for naught. That's a common feeling, but chances are it really wasn't.
Yeah, chances are you came a really, really long way in the process.
Yep. Yeah. And it's very important to recognize that.
Yep. Yeah. Are we ready for it?
Yep.
Okay.
It's ready as I'm going to get.
Figure I should ask now. Okay, so 2019. Let's start with you, Nate. What were your... So this is actually...
These are the easy goals that Chad says,
softballs.
Right? These are not softballs. These
So
I'm going to defend myself.
One thing really quick. This is from episode 191 back in last year, and that's where we got these. So if you want to hear the character with which these goals were espoused and everything else, like laid out, you can hear that.
And softballs, not in all cases, but they do, I think, lack definition.
Let's let the man say what they are.
Eat more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. So this is changing my overall diet to be healthier, carb centric. It eliminates the fast food and all that sort of stuff. I think this is the process goal to improve body composition.
Great process.
And most people in America have this goal like this week, and most people fail. I think saying that this is an easy goal is...
I don't think it's easy. I think it's too general. I think you can have some fruits, vegetables, whole grains, boom, check it off the list. Why not say, I want to have 3 servings of vegetables in 2 of my 3 meals.
You want me to make it smart?
Yeah, well, not even smart necessarily. Yeah. Just be more specific, so you actually are holding yourself to something.
Follow my Instagram. Because you'll see.
Yes, you will.
This isn't for me. This is enough to say these things, and I can do them and eat them at every meal.
That could be it right there. Every meal, eat fruits, vegetables, and/or whole grains.
Yeah, you just want something a little bit more specific with that. Yeah,
just to hold yourself accountable, because it's just a little too general.
But I did it though.
Sure. Yeah, you got there. But it can be helpful if somebody has a little bit more specificity. It can help them with the goal.
I totally agree with that.
Yep.
So if I could be more specific, and maybe that would have, I could even check marks every meal or something like that.
Sure.
But to me, I feel like I accomplished this. And this was a goal to be able to train more volume.
Yes.
And this is the process goal in order for me to have the outcome of training more.
Yep. If this is where we were a radio show, producer Tucker would hit the claps right now, the applause. So well done. It was met. Okay. Next goal.
Next goal.
Golf clap.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
Yeah.
Upgrade to Cat 3. I started the year as a Cat 5, requested the upgrade. They gave it to me based on some Reno races, which is awesome. And then I got enough points to get to Cat 2. I think at the beginning of the year, people are probably... How many of you listened to this and said, like, nice show, like try it, Nate.
So right now, if you went back and listened to if everybody could put themselves back in the situation of listening to this last year, I bet a lot of people were like, yeah, right.
Yeah, right. That's what I was going to say.
No, I think that one's a great goal.
Yeah.
I think it's perfect. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I actually now think it turned out to be a bit of a softball because you ended up upgrading the 2.
Yeah. But we didn't think it was a softball at the time.
Not at all.
Not at all, right? And this is also...
Isn't that a good goal then?
It's a great goal.
Said it was.
All of these have time to them too, it's worth saying, because all of these we were planning to
for the year.
Do within the year.
Yeah, maybe I'm just looking at this from a coaching perspective where I want all the details so I can hold my athlete accountable, whereas Nate just knows, I know what I'm doing. I'll remember all this.
I'm going to jump to, these all kind of relate to each other and they're out of order. So the eating the better high quality food and not trying to focus on weight loss too, because that would knock me where I see 1 pound heavier on the scale and I'm like, I'm not eating today.
Yeah.
Right. And then it kills my workouts. That was to make it so that I could train more And the train more was to make it so that I could really race more and race more to get to Cat 3. Like that's like the kind of steps. And one other part of that is figuring out my health issues, because if you look back, kind of a little bit before this time last year, with our calendar feature, I had annotations for every time I was sick, and I went, was it 10 rounds of antibiotics in 15 months?
Wow.
It was crazy.
That's a lot.
I had so many sinus infections, and went to a whole bunch of doctors for years. I've had 2 surgeries and 1 procedure on my sinuses. I have a low IgG3. I went to the Mayo Clinic to look at that. They actually were like, it's depression. But then actually a doctor in Reno had prescribed me antibiotic rinses. And I think what's happening is I had an infection for many years, because I had yellow mucus for years, every time I blow my nose. Now after doing that, it's totally clear. And for those, I also tried going dairy-free for 5 months, and I went gluten-free for a while to see if that was related to it. I take about $100 of expensive pills that make my pee expensive.
There's a whole thread on this actually on forum.trainerroad.com.
Really did a lot of stuff around this, diligent with hand washing and all that sort of thing. But for me, this is all personal. I just had the balloons in my sinuses. I thought it was horrible until they reached in and took out these giant scabs. And now I can breathe pretty well. The solution I like right now is called Wilson solution. It's an antibiotic, an iodine, and saline. And what me and my ENT now, I have a new ENT, our plan is when I get a cold, flush that through prophylactically. And colds I get over really fast, a day or 2, and I'm good. As long as it doesn't go into a sinus infection. And then with my improved drainage and that, we think we're going to be okay. And then I do an ointment in my nose at the same time. And I rinse my nose too every day with a saline rinse. Yeah. And I do Flonase, and I probably do other stuff, but that's what I can
it's been better this year.
Yep. The only time I really got sick was when we went to Germany for Eurobike, and I didn't have my prophylactic, and we both got sick.
Yep.
And then we flew both ways.
Yeah.
And that also can cause I can feel it when it gets into my ear with the pressure change.
Yeah.
So anyways, I don't feel like that was an easy goal. I tried a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
No, I didn't think it was an easy goal either. I think it was too general again. Figure out health stuff. But again, it's meaningful to you. I'm not a coach who has to interpret this.
Yeah. So I've been sick a lot less, and that has unlocked so much more training for me.
Sure.
If you look at my calendar, Trainer Road /career/Nate/calendar. Is that the URL?
Yep.
But there. So I think I'm good now.
Cool.
I'm excited.
Your last one?
Do shorter races. So in this one, this is going to be with my goals next year, but doing lots of races and not doing these long ones. The long ones would make it so I couldn't train afterwards because I get killed. Plus, you'd have to do a taper into them. Doing lots of races made it a better chance for me to get to Cat 3. I think on my road results page shows 25 races, but I also did Reno races. So I want to say maybe around 30 races with cross and everything or more. Most of those races, though, had a minimum of 3-hour drive. Sometimes 6-hour drive round trip, sometimes 8 or 10, with overnights and away from my family. We're talking about doing less of those this year, but again, I put in a ton of effort to be able to do all those shorter races. So
because it's kind of easier to just do the long ones because we have a lot of long ones around us.
And 2, you could do 3 long ones a year, but I couldn't get my upgrade with that.
Yeah, sure, right, yeah.
So that's another thing where I think that's a hard thing to do, to go away every weekend and spend the night and do these races. So
the written goal doesn't seem like it has the specificity and everything else, but
it's all in my head.
Well, that's it. I mean, he's sharing this stuff now. If he had typed all this stuff on here, I would feel differently about.
Sure, of course.
His you like my goals?
Yeah, they're great.
Cool. Okay, I'll try to be more specific.
4 check marks. Way to go.
Yeah.
So my goals or my resolutions from last year. So I said every scheduled day do something instead of nothing. And that was a pretty strict goal. That would be pretty tough to be able to follow. I didn't do it, but I did better than 2018. Once again, talking about progress toward a goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I certainly did a lot better than 2018.
That's a win.
Yeah. I didn't achieve it, but at the same time,
that's it. If you get to an FTP of 349, you don't hit 350. Is that a
Come
win
on.
or not?
Yeah.
But it's 345. Probably a win too.
It's a step better, right?
Exactly.
And so we'll get into our next one.
Sorry to interrupt you, but sometimes too, when you're older, maintaining the same FTP based on our data is a huge win.
Yes.
So you might be like, oh, I'm not increasing, but if you're 45 plus, like that could be a huge win. If you're 55, that could be a giant win to maintain the same FTP.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
For
and
sure.
This is my only criticism with Jonathan's goals is that I would want to be more specific because I know how I would interpret that. Something could be almost anything I needed it to be on the day.
Yeah.
So rather I would put something, get on the bike for 30 minutes.
Yeah, and that's really what, once again, I probably should have been more explicit in writing that
I just
out.
know I would let myself off that hook a little too easily.
Yeah, that definitely wasn't my intent. My intent was to do minus versions of the workouts if I didn't have time to do the regular
In which case
version.
I would have written that down so that I'm on the hook for that specific thing.
Sure.
You're talking about like bicep curls with a beer, or
I stood at a standing desk instead of sat all day.
And something.
Or a weight vest.
Treat PT equally to training, and once again, what I was getting at with this one is the long battle that I had with knee injuries and trying to figure those out. There's a forum.trainerroad.com for the knee thread that we have on there, at least how I shared what I'm doing to manage that. And yeah, I was able to manage it effectively. And what I meant with this, high fives.
That is
huge.
good.
Yeah.
That's huge for Jonathan.
Be big 3 years, or actually, more, almost 4 years of battling with that. So, and basically, it's everything that's in the forum there, and just sticking to that all the time. And what I meant by treat it equally to training is a lot of the time it's like the training is the most important, and then we can fit PT in if we can.
Prioritize it as highly.
Yeah, and so I basically just looked at when I had an hour workout on my schedule. I thought, okay, well, I actually have to block out 2 hours because after the workout, then I have to do a lot of work on mobilizing and changing things up. So, so yeah, that worked well. Did that. Eat every hour on the bike, and this is really the context that was applied to this was in racing and training, right?
So you recognize you're under fueling.
Yes, big time. And I did that, and I feel like that's one of my strengths now as a rider is being able to stay fueled throughout a ride, even as long as Leadville, right?
that's awesome.
So
And you
did
notice
that.
a difference with
Oh, it's huge. Like, it's massive. Sweet spot work is not as difficult. Everything is just a little bit easier. It's awesome. So
nice.
VO2, everything. So then my stretch goal was to get a top 5 at nationals. I had done it before, but I knew that I had a long road to come back from the knee injuries and everything else. I was so close. I was 9th and 6th, and in mountain biking, I don't know if it's because we're all soft, but we have a top 5 podium. So I was so close, but didn't quite get it. So yeah, and this is like another concept on the stretch goal thing. Like you said, once again, progress toward a goal is important, but you should have a goal that forces you to the outer realms of what you think you can do, right?
Right.
And this was definitely a stretch. And I'm actually satisfied and pretty surprised at how close I was able to get with the lead up that I had into it. Awesome. And the last goal was enjoy riding my bike after Leadville. And I know that sounds silly, but Leadville, like in many cases, is my antithesis. Like it's like I ride bikes for the opposite reasons of Leadville's existence, right? Like
Cape Epic.
Yeah, and that's why I'm not doing it. So, and I knew that having done really big, long races like that before, I knew that it was going to be challenging for me to go through that race and then be eager to get on my bike. And I remember the day after Leadville, 2 days after Leadville, I was riding my bike and eager to do so and having fun. And I think a lot of that, and the way that I managed that and what that really meant to me, because this is an important thing that I'm getting now when we read these, there's more to it, right, behind it. Yeah. Is going into the race, not pushing myself into such a hole. And I know that upset a lot of people. A lot of people were upset that I didn't push myself and get the maximum time.
I was very upset.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah. But at the same time, I felt like that was necessary for me to be able, because for me, it's like a 2-year trajectory toward winning a national championship this year. So I knew that I didn't want to just go all out, completely blow myself up, then try to figure out how to pick up some pieces and glue myself back together to then rebuild for the next year. It wasn't my main goal. I didn't want to let it distract me. So not doing a ton of specific training for that, but doing enough and then making sure that I paced myself through the event helped. So
That's a great qualitative goal.
Yeah.
A really good example.
Yeah. Hard to measure that, right?
Yeah, super hard to measure that, but important.
I feel
really
it.
important. Yeah.
When you're burned out, you feel it. Chad, your goals.
Okay, we're going to blow through these because
No.
not only did I not achieve
We have
most
45
of them,
minutes left.
I didn't even attempt some of them. So apparently I said this, and I'm a little ashamed of myself for saying it, This is a quote. These are all moonshots. I'm probably going to pick one and fail.
It was said.
Yeah, so that's where I was coming from. So this should give you some insight into how committed I was to doing anything, at least on that day of the year. And then I also said if I do a 40K TT again, emphasis on if. So I wasn't even like, I'm going to do a 40K TT. Maybe that sub 50 is still attainable in my golden years. So you can see non-committal from the start. This is not a good foundation for hard work.
Right.
It's probably not going to happen.
Yeah.
Didn't happen.
The conditional if is present. So.
So I aimed at strength goals, but not only did I not pursue them with any level of ferocity, but I also didn't measure them. So I don't even know. I can look at them. I can look at them and say, nope, because I wanted to 1.5 times bench, body weight on bench, 2 times on squat, 2.5 on deadlift.
So let me just put
I know I
those
didn't
through.
make any of those.
250-pound bench, 360-pound squat, 440-pound deadlift.
None of those happened. No. And largely, well, partially because I didn't go after him, but largely because I didn't do strength work. I did metabolic conditioning work instead because I wasn't on the bike, and I still like to do that short, hard stuff and challenge the aerobic system and the anaerobic and the muscular, blah, blah, blah. So my focus would never gelled at any point.
But you got probably, I think, more fit, right?
I did.
In that realm.
So at some point I should have recognized I'm definitely not going down this route. I should revise all my goals so that they are once again relevant and motivating. Because I had no specific goals, and I just kind of, I won't say I went through motions, but I didn't achieve anything particular, which for this year worked because I didn't really have any.
Can I take a leather couch step back really quick, and just to give people some insight into this? I think you were pretty burned out on riding coming in. So
I was coming into the prior year, and I forced it all year. So
you were like doubly burned out, right?
Yeah.
Going into this. So when you look at this and like this is, once again, we're talking about progress toward a goal. Even though you didn't write down the goal, you're actually enjoying riding your bike again.
Yeah, and fully back on the bike.
And that's
huge.
Yep.
In terms of, because these are just New Year's resolutions about cyclists, right? So in this case, in cycling in general, that's progress.
Yeah, so I may not have recognized it at the time, but I was still maybe indirectly pursuing the eventual goal of being interested in riding my bike again, and racing.
Yeah, I picked that up. My
You're real smart.
Yeah.
All right.
So next one. This one blew me away. 100 alternating pistols.
Oh yeah. So again, no. But I did do a workout.
You do 50.
I did a workout.
I did a workout that had a requirement of 50, and I did 50.
That's impressive,
Wow.
man.
So I don't have a hard time with pistols.
So hold on really quick. If you don't know what a pistol is, go onto YouTube, look at what a pistol is, and then try to do 50 alternating ones. You're not gonna. Chances are most of us aren't gonna be able to do one.
Yeah.
So that's.
But once you get to a
I
point
know
where
you
can
didn't
do
work
10,
on that.
probably.
So I'm not saying like congratulations, you made your goal, but I don't care. 50 is just really impressive.
That is very
It's
impressive.
This one's
gnarly.
impressive too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 25 chin-ups, 25 pull-ups. I got to 20 chin-ups and 18 pull-ups. So
Over a day?
no, I had two different goes at it. So one day I did chin-ups.
I'm
a couple
joking.
days
You
later
do these
I
in
did-
a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like
You
this
can't come
is,
off the bar until you get that many done.
I feel like this is the test. Like we should ask somebody like, how many pull-ups can you do? And if they can do over like 10 pull-ups in a row, you're like, you're probably not a cyclist. Like,
Well, see,
you know what I mean?
there
Like-
again is the question of relevance. How relevant is this to me?
Yeah, when I was
yeah,
a swimmer,
good
I
point.
could do 36 overhand pull-ups.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Triathletes too. When
Yeah.
I was a swimmer, I
Amazing.
could do, I think 20 was my best. And it's amazing, right? And
it's
I never
crazy.
did any pull-ups at all. And I just went in the gym and like could do 20.
I know. I can't do a single one right now. I mean, I don't have the upper body strength, and all my muscle has shifted down to my legs.
Congratulations, you're a cyclist.
Exactly.
That's the test.
Yeah, but the question then becomes, can you do this when you're pushing 50? So
Oh,
Yeah.
we'll talk. Look at
Yeah.
that. All right, cool.
Okay, check this, Tucker. Mark this. Set a Slack
We'll
reminder
get
for
into
when I'm
those
50.
soon.
You're not 50 though.
All right, next one was to snatch 135 pounds.
yeah, I got that one.
Check.
Nice.
Nice
Now
job.
it's,
And
a
wh-
185 reset. Now I got to do my body weight.
Ooh, okay,
Booyah.
cool.
Yep.
Get comfortable at 7-minute mile pace for a marathon.
We were actually moving toward that, and I felt really good about it because 8s were becoming comfortable as running's ever going to get. But then Amaret did her triathlon, and she kind of tapered her running a bit, and I only ran with her. So I kind of fell off the mark. But again, I didn't have a particular goal. So what was I chasing? I have something now. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then last one was maybe quotes. Maybe get back in the pool.
Get back in the pool. Because I love that. I want to make an Instagram meme on this. Is like New Year's resolutions and write these down.
Maybe get back in the pool.
Get back in the pool.
Yeah,
it's so good.
I just like to kick everything off with a maybe.
Now, aside from the resolutions, we had this is kind of interesting.
Nostradamus.
Yeah, so I think you laid out some predictions, Chad, and it's kind of weird.
One of them was just actually they were both. Two of them were self-fulfilling. One of them was just a pretty educated guess.
So number one, you said a new Shiv TT would come out.
Yeah,
and it did.
And they were due.
And it did.
They were due. That wasn't the hardest get.
People have been saying it for years.
They were due like 5 years ago, right? Like I bet people in the company might have even had thought that something would come up before then.
Yeah, I think had we
We're
been
not
to the wind
sure.
tunnel and Chris, you avoided the question.
I asked.
Had that happened yet?
I asked him about it, and he just said that's what everyone wants.
Yeah.
He didn't tell us anything more.
But the way he reacted told me otherwise.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, it alluded to more than he was
Don't ruin this.
meaning to
You're
share.
thinking you were prophetic here, Chad.
Okay.
Don't ruin it. Number two, you said it in quotes, I won't do a whole lot of riding at Old Pueblo.
He did 0.
He was good on that one. Spot on.
Yep.
And number three, I'll probably only hit one of my goals.
And he did the snatch.
Weight aim low.
Boom.
There's one other thing we talked about watching the video is us doing tandem TT nationals. I'm still 100% down for that, Chad.
I'm okay with that.
Ooh,
Yeah, but I'm not being a stoker. So.
So I have to figure everything out. So we just need a bike that fits us.
Robert at Specialized, if you can find out how to make that bike actually rideable, that would be great.
Just make us a bike.
Yeah, just make us a bike. You make crazy things all the
He
time.
could.
They're so
Robert could totally make us a bike.
Oh yeah,
totally
he can make us
could.
a very
Yeah.
fast bike.
Yeah. And for those who know, Robert's the creative director at Specialized, and he's been responsible for much of the brand forever. So cool and super interesting guy. 2020. Let's go into resolutions. First ones first.
Chad has he's going to tell us about why we did bad stuff.
No, I actually did. I already peppered that in.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, it was good.
Right.
2020. Chad, should you go
Okay,
first?
I guess I'm rolling here.
Let's start. Yeah.
So hold myself accountable by actually displaying my goals and then measuring them rather than forgetting them promptly, just tucking them away. And then pick a focus. I was all over the place. I mean, I had strength goals, I had running goals, I had swimming goals, I had riding goals. I think I was just clutching at straws, trying to find something that was interesting.
You had not riding goals.
Yeah.
Not doing
those were
one
there
Old
too.
Pueblo.
Triathlete goals.
Yeah.
Yep. And then find a 40K TT course, and it's proving challenging. If racing organizers in basically the Western states have anything along the lines of a flat 40K TT, and they can let us know, that'd be super cool. Because I've seen a couple. There's a series down in LA. They do one at the beginning of each month, January through May. But it's clear down in LA, and I don't know what the course profile is. And then there's another one that cropped up on the calendar, but there's no information on it, so I'm only guessing.
What about that course in New Mexico? It's supposed to be the fastest 40K TT course in the United States.
Oh, that's interesting.
And they have fresh pavement as of
And what
2
time of
years
year
ago.
is that?
Ooh.
I'm not sure.
Because I'd like a May, June
If anybody
sort of date.
knows, jump in forum.trainerroad.com, and then you can find this episode 239, and give us some information.
Any flat 40K TTs or any Cat 2 only stage races that have flat TTs.
Yeah, it's somewhere around 5,000. They say it's the perfect elevation of 5,000 feet. So, which is kind of like Satley, but I think it's just an out and back. So instead of having any turns.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
And then I am at my house building a training center, which is solely dedicated to our triathlon pursuit in the 2022. Is that when we're doing that?
Yeah, and can I put a flag out there? This is a Chad and his fiance training center. This isn't just I'm coming to
let's
Chad's
make that
training
clear.
center.
It's just mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's going to be quite nice. Endless pool, the woodways, and I will have no excuses in terms of a training facility. There'll be no weather excuses, no excuses at all. Yeah,
Cool.
It's all there and ready to be. Well, will be ready to be used.
Okay.
And then the strength goals, I might just reset the ones I had. It all depends on, again, if you pursue strength, that's one thing. If you pursue, metabolic conditioning workouts and you're trying to do that while becoming a better bike rider, that is a very tough balance. I'm not sure there's one to actually be struck.
Yeah, that's tough. Okay, so I'm going to get into the specifics of your goals. For the 40K TT course thing, do you have a specific goal behind that?
Yeah, sub 50.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know what FTP that'll necessitate because I did a 54 on garbage watts, as I've talked about before. So the fact
Garbage
is,
for you.
Yeah, well, garbage based on what I know I can do. Yeah, yeah, what I can do.
Sure.
And
What were the watts for that? 54?
it was like 285 or something. It was very low, and I still got a 54, which I've had to bury myself for a 54 in the past with a much higher FTP. So the fact is, my
optimized.
equipment and my positioning are tops.
Nice.
Yep.
Running, do you have a specific goal for that?
Same thing, just to get down to a comfortable 7-mile pace and be able to extend that. So, first I'll apply it to 10K and then incrementally step up from there to a half marathon and then eventually a marathon. And I'd like to choose a marathon for this 2021 season.
Oh, I like that.
I'm working on that
Nice.
too. Yeah.
Cool.
Or I'm sorry, 2020 season.
Oh,
Half
this year.
I'm still batting that around. Let me work that out.
Is that a maybe?
It's not a maybe. It's not a maybe. No, it's a hard gonna do, but it's whether it's going to be a half marathon or a marathon in 2020. I'm not sure.
I like that step of, honestly, should be 5K first, 10K, half, full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then what is your, what's your process goal to get there? Certain amount of runs per week?
I haven't even nailed if I'm going to do a half marathon, marathon. So once I figure that out, then I'll try to figure out, what sort of mileage I need to be doing, when I need to start this up, and
Cool.
all the details.
Amber, we didn't cover your 2019 ones. You didn't put those ones in, but your 2020 ones you did. So want to cover those?
Yeah. So I've got two big goals, and they're not really, really specific at this point, and I might get a little more specific with these. But the first one is really just to become a more well-rounded athlete, because I've been so laser focused on cycling. So a lot of my goals really have to do with kind of transitioning out of full-time racing, embracing a new chapter in life, and I would really like to be a much more well-rounded athlete. So a few people commented in the forum about encouraging me to give running a shot.
Yeah. Because of the triathlon talk.
Well, that, and I think I think that might be something to see if I can get to a point where it's not completely miserable. That might be a reasonable goal. But I want to do a lot more mobility work. I'd like to do more lifting, and I want to learn some new bike skills. So most of my skills are really road focused. So it'd be fun to get into the dirt skills. And I don't, again, no specific goals right now, but
Cool.
maybe we'll get a little more specific on that. And then the second one is very qualitative, and this is to become my own best friend on the bike. And that sounds a little bit, I don't know, silly, but over the years, and actually now that I've stepped out of racing full time, I'm realizing more and more that I think a lot of athletes do this. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Maybe not everybody does this.
You're not.
But I think a lot of athletes confuse toughness with internal verbal abuse. And it's really understandable that we do this, because I think most of us at some point in our lives had somebody try to, air quotes, motivate us with really abusive language. And at some point we learn really early on that that's what it means to be motivated. And so I think a lot of us tend to, our internal drive comes from this pretty dark place of, what are you doing, you idiot? I mean,
Totally.
Think about some of the things that we say to ourselves, and it's pretty
We don't want them
It's
externalized.
not nice.
No.
You probably wouldn't say it to anybody else.
No, and if somebody else said it to you, it would be pretty
Cruel.
Cruel, yeah.
Harsh.
So anyway, I realize that this is something that I do a lot, and I did a lot for a long time. And now, kind of stepping out of it, I realize that it's not necessary for me to be motivated and driven. It's not necessary for me to continue to progress and find improvement. And so I would really like to work on becoming more truly resilient versus relying on this internal abuse. So I'm looking to be more compassionate with myself and find joy in the progress more than that. We can call it negative self-talk, but let's be honest, it really crosses the line sometimes into that truly abusive language. So yeah, I want to become my own best friend on the bike.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, I have mine into process and outcome. Process, every scheduled day, do something instead of nothing. Yep, same goal as last year. Just do better at it. And
Wait, 30 minutes on the bike at least, so Jack gets more
Or is this
credit.
let me
bicep
put
curl
that down.
country?
No,
Or
you don't have to figure it out right now. Just
minus versions,
give it some thought.
if not normal or plus. All right, that makes for really good podcast content right there. Me typing into the microphone. So yeah, and the reason that I have that goal is because I know that if I do more, and I have a lot of low hanging fruit with that, I know that if I do more, I will get more. In other words, my ceiling is still far from where I'm not close to touching it. So, and if I do this one, that will keep me on the plan, that will keep me doing the things I need to do, and I will get faster. PT every day. And I got more specific with that one instead of treating it with the same importance, because at this point now it is very much in my mind to treat it the same level of importance. And now it's just doing it every day. Because there's a temptation that I had, and even last year and into this year, into the latter portion of 2019, where I was like, yeah, I mean, I kind of got to the habit of pairing the two. But then there were points where I'd be off the bike for a week, something like that, and I would step away from the PT and I would just notice a difference. And so it's doing it every day, and it doesn't take a lot now. It's just quick maintenance. So, and that one's measurable and easy to do. And every single day I should be able to do it unless I find myself stranded somewhere and not able to, I don't know. I'd have to be like a prisoner. I can do this stuff really any place. Final point, and this is obviously there will be exceptions, but no eating after 7 p.m. So I've noticed that this is one where, when I was a kid, my parents told me, like, nothing good happens after 10 p.m., right? Like, with your friends, like good decisions don't happen. I think I remember Chris Rock talking about that, too, at one point. He's like, if you go to the ATM after 10 p.m., like, just don't do that. Like, nothing good's going to come from that. Like, when I go to the fridge after 7 p.m., we end pretty early in our house. Like, our son's in bed at 7:30, 7:45, and then, 8, he's asleep, and then we're heading to bed, too. So there's just no reason for me to take in then, because we're fortunate enough to have a pretty regimented schedule for dinner, and we're able to eat dinner before then. So that's just one of my things that I've noticed. When I don't eat after 7 p.m., then my body composition improves. And when I do, it doesn't improve. And what I'm talking about improvement is just basically keeping my fat numbers in check, right, is what and just measured with a scale.
There's some impact on sleep, too.
Yes, and that's a big thing for sure. Mm-hmm. So those are mine. And then the outcome goals. So those things should build toward the next two things. One of them is get my Cat 2 upgrade. And I don't want to say by end of year, but I'll just say end of year, because it's not my main goal. So I don't want that to take
road
precedence.
Upgrade.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my road upgrade. And then the second one, the outcome goal, is to win a cross-country Olympic national championship. I could have given myself a little bit of leeway and said a short track championship, or I could have said any championship, because I'll be racing both.
It'd be easy then.
But no. But I want
easy. Like I said, sometimes these pass or fail goals are effective.
Yeah, and so I know that it's within my capability to do it. I also know there's so many other things that will affect my ability to be able to fulfill that goal, namely very fast athletes that are training really well and working just as hard, right? And if not harder. So there are plenty of things, but that's a North Star for me to shoot for, and I think I know I can get there, and if I hit my process goals, I give myself the best chance of it.
Yeah, put yourself in the position to do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Those are mine. Nate, yours?
Okay, so mine are mostly process, and so looking back at this last year with my travel, travel and sickness, but wasn't sick a lot last year. Travel kills my training. Between now and June, I think I have at least 8 weeks that I'm traveling, which is crazy. And you take 8 weeks out of like your plan.
It's a lot.
That's a lot.
That's like entire phase of training that's gone. So if I don't do things to make it so that I do that during, like, I'm not going to hit the volume goals and do well. So overall, I mean, I don't want to be checked on this, but I really want to, beat Amber and Brandon at Cape Epic. And I really want to get sometime in my life a Cat 1 upgrade. And to do that, I have to be steady on my volume. So Here are the goals that I want to do for this year. Bring a bike or power meter pedals on trips.
Yep.
I could we have the bike bags. I could bring a bike and a trainer, Feedback Sports, in there and just train in my hotel room. There are some trips that I can't do that. So it's not possible to bring a bike on them. I want to work out aerobically on those trips. Worst case, run. Very worst case. But and just not injure myself, of course, when running. But at least do that, so I don't have a complete week off, unless it's in my plan. It's a good week to have a week off. Mm-hmm. Also have the biggest year of volume yet for my Cape Epic prep. I'm going to do a lot of 2-hour trainer workouts, which I'm already doing, but I also want to do some 2.5 and 3-hour workouts. I think 3 hours of nonstop pedaling, especially when you pair it with intervals at the beginning and then aerobic afterwards, will really set me up for next year for Cape Epic. Mm-hmm. And I think looking so far ahead, the increase in volume, it's hard to have to do that quickly and not just get burnt out. Mm-hmm. So all the stuff that I'm going to do now between now and October is going to set me up for my final build of November to March for Cape Epic. Really look at that.
Multi-year plan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then here, you guys made fun of me about this, but get at least one Cat 1 upgrade point, because in my mind, P12s are a different beast. And I think there is a large amount of people who upgrade and never place again for the rest of their lives. Sure. My racing age this year now is 38. And I feel like if I can get one upgrade point then it's just a factor of going to enough races. Like, I don't think you ever get lucky in P12s. Like, half-court basketball shot, you see people do that. They get lucky, right?
Yeah.
But in road racing, like, I can never show up at the Tour de France and get lucky one year. I could do it a million times and win. Where in basketball, like, you can do a shot and do it, right? There's some sports where there's luck involved. In cycling, it's never luck. Same with triathlon. I'm never going to get lucky and win Kona, right?
Yeah.
You just got to be good. So if I place once, that means I can probably place 35 more times. I just have to do enough racing.
Yeah.
So that's where that comes from.
Chad and I were talking about this when we were planning this one out. Like, getting one upgrade point to us seems a little weak.
It seemed like a low bar, but now I understand his rationale.
Yep, because once you get one, then more can
You
come.
can get more. Yep. That means I've gotten myself to a point that I can place in a P12 race.
Yeah.
Then it's just all the tools are there. I just got to go to enough races.
Need your eyes to be open to the fact you can do it.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah, and why if we didn't have that bit of information, we feel like Nate is very capable of getting a point for sure. I think it's so take this with confidence.
We don't know
Nate.
yet.
No, I think he got it. Yeah. So
But it's P12s.
it's tough.
Legit. And the racing style is different, and their teams.
I think we're going to look back at this goal, though, at the end of this year, and we're going to be look at it like the Cat 3 upgrade one. Like, of course he was going to do that.
The problem with this is I'm not going to be racing as much, and with my upgrade before, I could race multiple times during the day. And there's Masters racing
You still
too.
do a couple.
Yeah.
if it's crit.
But a lot of these races too that were good for me, I'm going to be traveling during, so I'm not going to have as many race opportunities this year. I'm not racing 25 times. I might be racing 4 or 5 times. So, and you mess up. How easy is it to mess up the finish to 4 or 5 races?
Oh yeah.
Amber, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you've ever done it, but it's pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
Like one bad decision, then I got to wait 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah.
Let's get into Greg's question, shall we?
Questions, sweet.
All right.
Second question.
It says, hey guys, I think we need to add points to the stars to cover just how good you guys do with this podcast. Now that the butter is out of the way, sorry, Jonathan, Nate about the lactose, he says. But yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Greg. Very kind of you. Also, all question submitters, you don't have to praise us before you ask your question. You can just ask your question
Always
too.
buttering us up.
But certainly,
I got there.
Yeah. But certainly, if you do praise us, it's not like we're going to ignore it. We appreciate it.
You do have to follow me on Instagram, or else they don't get answers.
I actually have it. It's in the spreadsheet right now. Yeah, cross-reference that. So I'm looking to lose a significant amount of weight that has accumulated. I'll be 35 in July 2020, and I'm looking to drop above 60 pounds. I have no unrealistic expectations of having it gone in short order. Down that path lies illness, burnout, and the extreme end, eating disorders. So the question, how would you lay out a nutrition strategy to fuel workouts, but still provide a sufficient caloric deficit to head in the right direction? Of course, there's the obvious dichotomy of trying to lose weight and increase power production, but I'm guessing that at least some fat mass will, and he says in quotes, melt off somewhat by default based on smart choices on and off the bike. Thanks, guys. 5.2 star podcast. So we covered kind of the principles behind this and just, up above when we were talking to Ben there. But we can probably jump into this one and kind of cover more specifics.
Yeah, and I think each of us has a little bit of advice to offer.
Yeah, for sure.
It seems pretty sound too. I have 2 bits. First and foremost, understand that you're pursuing a new or at least a different lifestyle. So this isn't something you can do short term, stop doing it, and expect to just magically have everything level off.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't work that way. So everything you're changing now is going to be a change you're going to carry into pretty much every day of your life from this point forward. So just recognize you're changing things. This isn't temporary. And then secondly, be patient. This is not going to happen fast. You've already alluded to the fact that you got a good handle on that. Changes once you're in the midst of it, though. Once you start getting a little bit of progress and you think, well, I already lost 3 pounds in 1 week. I can probably do that. I can probably do 4 or 5 next week. Slow your roll. Be patient.
Yeah, super big, super key point there. It's just that it never happens quite like we want it to happen, right? It always takes time to roll out. The consistency part, I think, is huge. And you already alluded to this in this case, Greg. So, I mean, you understand it like a sustainable approach to this. But the crash diet and like, that leads to rebounding, it's always, I find that sustainable weight loss that's done for a person that's transformative. In fact, one of our newer employees, welcome to the team, Jesse, by the way, a copywriter, he was talking about the approach that he took to losing weight, and really the underlying principles he does to maintain it, and really it's moderation is a big consistent principle, and doing the logical things like we talked about earlier, avoiding alcohol, right? Getting dark leafy greens, lots of fiber, eating the right sort of stuff, the whole foods like we talked about before. A lot of it is pretty simple.
At this time of year too, a lot of people will be crash dieting, and what happens is although your weight goes down, you lose a good portion of muscle for how fast you're losing those calories. Your basal metabolic rate goes down. You get these urges, like you're like, I am so hungry. You binge back, you gain the weight back, but you're in a worse spot as before because you have less muscle and more fat, and your basal metabolic rate is now lower because of the lack of muscle, and then it's easier then to gain weight.
So it's a terrible cycle, and people will repeat it on an annual basis, if not more frequently.
Over and
it's
over
crazy.
and over. And every year they'll gain like 10, 15 pounds, and then 5 years go by, and you're like, whoa, I got 60 pounds to lose because of this, like, this is the year I'm going to do it, and you try to willpower it through. It almost takes willpower to like not try to crash, right?
That's
Be
real.
consistent.
That's what I mean. Be patient.
Patience.
And that's why we've talked about this before. But I mean, if this is your goal, and we certainly don't want to make this feel like we're telling people that they should shift their body composition. This has to be your goal, right? Like, this is what you want. This is just what we find to be the most helpful. One of the things is as tempting as it is to chase a weight goal, because we get dropped on climbs and we think about power to weight, right? But think of it in terms of body composition. And that, like, I'm even thinking, like, when athletes are transitioning, like you mentioned, like swimming, you were able to do a ton of pull-ups. Then cycling, you were doing something else. I bet your body composition shifted. That's like how it works, right? It happens. And that should be something that you keep track of rather than just an overall number. It's going to be probably a healthier approach for somebody, especially if you're chasing performance.
I like what Amber says, and this is how I did last year. My body composition was great. My performance went up. I fuel my workouts, focus on high quality food, train a bunch, and my body will figure out what's the best shape and look for me.
Totally does.
And it just, I don't look like some of the guys in the Tour de France.
Sure.
But I performed really well, and my body fat's at a spot. I got abs. That's good. Right? But I don't have veins in my quads, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I think if I would have focused the whole year only on body composition, and there's a point where, yes, you're overweight and it's unhealthy, you need to lose that and maybe focus on that. But once you get to a point where you're kind of like most of the peloton, you don't need to be the roadmap of veins in your quads. Like some people are. And I think a lot of that too is just genetics. They're just naturally vascular.
Fitness doesn't have a look. Like in terms of what your own fitness, what it should be, right? Or body composition. It doesn't have a look. And this, you already talked about this previously, but this is where a food journal is like so hugely important. When I started tracking things and looking at numbers, that was very, sure, the numbers were super shocking at first, realizing how much stuff I took in. But even away from numbers, just keeping track of the things that you eat, it can be so helpful. Like,
be aware.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to quote Dotsie Bausch on this one. She brought this to my attention a long time ago, and I think it's incredibly powerful, which is using a food journal. There's a lot of ways that you can use a food journal. One is, the classic way of doing this is to track calories, and that can be really interesting just to show you, especially, looking at how much protein you're taking in, how much carbohydrate. For me, when I started working with a nutritionist and got this prescription for a total number of grams of protein to get in every day, I could not believe how little I had been taking in compared to how much I should have been. And that was pretty mind-blowing. So sometimes, you kind of assume that it's going to teach you that you need to be eating less, but you might be surprised. But using a food journal to understand, I think what's really powerful about it is it teaches you to identify old habits and what motivates them, right? So like breaking down a habit it consists of a trigger, an action, and a reward. So identifying like, when are you eating out of habit as opposed to with, intention of fueling or getting, nourishing yourself. What are the triggers for those habits? Maybe you have some really great ones that you want to keep and reinforce. And then what are the ones that you want to replace? And I wouldn't say, stop a bad habit, find something to replace it with that's incrementally better, because I think that that's just a little bit more of a sustainable approach. The other thing, and this is Dotsie's thing, which I think is really important, is with a food journal, you can start to understand how foods affect you. And you might identify that there are some like really just amazing superfoods for you. Like it's something that you really enjoy, it's satiating, it's comforting, and boy, does it ever give you energy and you feel amazing for the next 6 hours. Versus like, I've had a couple people comment on like, oh yeah, you said, if you just give your body what it needs, it'll turn into, what it needs to be for what you want to do. But my body won't do that because if I just eat what I want, then, it's not going to turn out that well. Well, I'm not saying just eat what you want. I'm saying give your body the fuel it needs. That might not be a donut. I don't know.
Yeah.
But when you do a food journal like this, you start to realize that there might be some foods that you gravitate to out of habit or out of a craving, and you think you really want it, but then how do you feel 30 minutes later, an hour later?
I think that might be the single best use for a food journal.
Yeah, you identify foods that are your kryptonite, and then you can also identify foods that are just like superpower foods that turn you into like the best version of yourself.
Can I flip that a bit too?
Yeah.
Because I find a lot of the time, like I have a really good friend and she's like kale obsessed. She's like the kale queen, right? But she got to a point where she basically realized through tracking it all, she was like, oh wow, I'm eating so much of this now. I've gotten so obsessed with it. And when I look at it, it's not delivering the same benefit that I get when I eat a greater variety of things. Like
Right.
I feel better when I'm doing that, right? So even though like you can find something that you just think that like this is a really healthy thing and this is what I'm going to eat a ton of, maybe it doesn't resonate with you quite as much as when you're eating something that's more balanced.
Exactly. And everybody's different. And keep in mind, mood is actually important. So, there might be something that sounds really good that you eat and then your mood crashes an hour later. I mean, finding foods that actually taste good, that's incredibly important. It's part of feeling satisfied. It's part of just general well-being. But I promise you, if you do a food journal, you will find foods that you actually genuinely enjoy, that deliver a lot of great energy, and that are actually pretty healthful. So it's really fun to identify what really works for you. And I think it's different for individuals. So, yeah. And then the other thing you can do is as you're modulating maybe some of changing habits or replacing habits that you don't think are that great, keeping track of how those new changes and habits are affecting you.
Yeah, absolutely. If you aren't tracking all that stuff, even the subjective stuff, like how you feel, that's super important, especially when you get into diet. We've talked about that plenty of times. Workouts then become easier, and it just changes how you feel in general, right? What else do we want to cover on this?
I just want to say, just be aware. This is what Jesse's tip is, and it's so key. And Jesse was extremely overweight, and then he's now at a healthy weight.
He's our copywriter.
Yes.
What you're speaking about. Yeah.
He was like, for him, he said coffee creamer. Like you can just that could be an extra couple 100 calories a day by putting in coffee creamer. I said this, but so nuts are healthy for you, but if you have weight to lose and you're eating like a handful of nuts, handful of nuts can be 300, 400, even 500 calories.
Very calorie dense.
Yep. One Starbucks latte. It's like, I just get one coffee in the morning. Those can be 400 to like 800 or 900 calories.
If losing weight or affecting body composition is on your agenda, Starbucks has no place in your life.
Unless it's black coffee.
Yeah.
Sure.
In which case, go somewhere where the coffee's
Starbucks, not a sponsor of this podcast. Thanks, Chad.
But the point is that things that we take in that we think aren't bad.
Well, you don't, without that, you're not aware of them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're just like, oh, it's just a little bit of snack. And you don't realize that maybe if you're aiming for a 500 calorie deficit during the day, a couple of these things added up to 600 or 700 calories, and it could be your entire deficit.
And food journaling is a pain, but these are the things you discover.
Right.
Well,
and you don't have to journal forever. Like just long enough to start identifying some of these key things.
It's, iPhone, the Notes app. Just
Yeah,
put it in
there are
there, just
definitely
type in what
easier
you're
ways.
doing.
Yeah.
And then later on, if you want to put in MyFitnessPal, you can, but you could do it pretty quickly.
Yeah. And the other thing with this too is that, like, to your point, Amber, you can check back in every once in a while with this whole process. Like, you go years without it, maybe months, and then suddenly you just do it for a week or 2 weeks, and it's a good systems check.
Even easier, just take a picture of what you eat with your phone. Bam, bam, bam. And you can look back and be like, oh, I didn't need that. I didn't need that. Didn't need that.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
you have to type.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What else do we want to cover on this? We have plenty of notes, but we've covered kind of some of these things in a prior question here.
Just one other thing I think for Greg is the higher your fitness is, the more calories you're going to burn per hour. I remember back when my FTP was like 220, I used to look at Chad's workouts. And in an hour, Chad would be burning 1,000 calories. And I'm like, what? I'd be burning like 400 calories an hour.
Yeah.
I was like, how easy would it be to maintain good like good body composition if you're burning 1,000 calories an
hour. And that's true too, but it can also steer you down the path of thinking I can get away with more than I can. So you do still have to to keep balance in mind.
Oh yeah.
I'll just reiterate what I've said before, which is to fuel the workouts, a good rule of thumb is the calories you take in before and during your workout should equal what you burn during training, and then have a good recovery drink. It doesn't have to be, 800 calories, 200-300 calories, protein and carbohydrate is enough. And then off the bike, the other meals that you're having the rest of the day, that's where you want to create your sustainable deficit. And that's where you really want to focus on nutrient density. And in those cases, so, I would focus on carbohydrate for fueling your training. And then in your nutrient dense meals off the bike, focus on just getting tons of produce, whole foods. And then that's where you really want to focus on your protein intake. And I've worked with nutritionists and a couple of physiologists on stuff with this. And one of the rules of thumb that I was told was, don't worry too much about fat. I mean, it's a really easy place to reduce caloric intake because every gram of fat is so calorie dense. But we need fat. We do. So if you're really focused on fueling your training and you're getting really good quality food in the meals off the bike and you're still getting around maybe a 500 calorie deficit on the day, don't worry so much about the fat. Just eat whatever fat is incidental to your protein intake and to your produce intake. Fat's really important for brains. So
if you're eating like the healthier foods, it becomes like you get the right amount. If you're eating the fried foods, then it can easily get to be, if you're going to McDonald's, it's easy to have too much fat. But if you're eating like salmon and salads with olive oil and stuff, unless you're doing like a cup of olive oil, it just naturally happens.
Right. Like if you're just putting some olive oil on a salad to taste, chances are it's going to be a good amount.
Yeah.
And then just, I guess with respect to getting the ball rolling, there's a motivating kind of food fitness cycle that takes shape after a little while. And it's as your fitness improves, you find yourself making better dietary choices.
Yeah.
And as your dietary choices improve, you find your fitness going up. So the two kind of feed off one another. So really, if you can just kind of ride out that initial period and get through that, maybe a sticking point you've encountered a number of times, just get to that point where you have a little momentum in one of those two areas and they start feeding off each other. You gain momentum in both those areas and you're rolling.
Cool thing is you just start to feel better. And then all of a sudden you realize that you really want to do the things that make you feel better.
Yeah.
It becomes easier.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah. Over time for sure. Let's jump into some live questions that we have coming in here. First one from Chris says, a power meter question. I calibrate before each ride, but almost always get the same value back. Does this mean nothing has changed in calibration, or is there a range within each torque offset? So we should probably explain calibration a little bit.
Yeah, calibration is going to be the y-axis offset. It's like zeroing your scale. That's pretty much what it is. And for some power meters, I've noticed this too, where every time it's like the same or it's within one. But in some power meters, there's a little bit variation. Either way, I don't think it really matters. I'm not sure how they're doing the calibration, but what they always say is, if you're getting back a valid calibration, you're probably golden. And then or if you're getting like this wild change. So if you're always getting like 268, 268, 267, minus 4,000, like that minus 4,000, they're contact your manufacturer, right? But even
or take your foot off the pedal.
Yeah, temperature though will affect that. So if you go 268, 268, then it's cold. It goes to 100 or 300. Don't worry about that. Just worry about those really huge swings.
You know what I do to kind of always double check it is I calibrate twice. So like I'll calibrate, and then if the number is different, sometimes it's basically the same. Then if the number is different, then I'll hit calibrate again, and I'll just to kind of double check, just in case some weird anomaly happened. And it's normal. Also, you may have crazy like I have a Power 2 Max that gives me 0 every time. Then I have a Quark that gives me 458 almost all the time, somewhere around there. And then I have a 4i's that I think gives me somewhere around like 70. And so it's the number itself isn't important. We're talking about like precision, not accuracy, right? We're talking about moving,
some will just
staying
give
within
you
the zone.
will give us like success or fail. So there's not a number. So as long as we're not displaying failure, you're good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so that's how that works. Next one's from Ramon. Says, one of my goals this year is to get longer sleep. I've noticed no matter how early I go to bed, I still end up getting the same amount of 6 to 6.5 hours. And I get this from a sleep tracker. Any tips? This can kind of be a I've noticed this too. When you start to build up like a habit of sleeping at a specific schedule, your body tends to stick to it.
Yeah, I wonder how long he's been doing it. First off, because it does take time to adjust, and I would make, and I haven't seen any research to back that. These have to be small adjustments. So we're talking, they say try going to bed an hour earlier. That's a big ask.
league.
Yeah, try 15 minutes. Seriously, go 15-minute steps, and once those 15 minutes start to actually take hold, grow it to a half hour, grow it to 45 minutes, maybe work up to that hour. Other than that, just look at your sleep habits. Are you looking at screens before you go to bed? Or are you eating a bunch of carbohydrate, or even just a bunch of food before you go to bed? Are you overhydrated such you have to get up and pee a couple times in the night
Or in the morning?
Yeah,
like
you
wake up with that urgency that makes you get out of bed, and then falling back asleep is out of the question.
Light in the morning and
Light
sound.
all night.
You have a partner that always gets up at the same time, and you magically wake up at that same time. It's probably the partner's like moving around is doing it.
Temperature.
Also, temperature. I would just stay in bed longer. So if you want to have it happen,
That's real. I've forced myself. I think there's no way I'm going to fall back asleep, but I'll lay there for another 10, 15 minutes. Next thing I know, my alarm goes off. It's an hour later.
Yeah.
I would just lay there for until 8 hours if you want. That's what you want, and do that for if you do that for a month and you're doing all these good sleep habits and you're still not increasing it, I'd be very surprised.
I'd see a sleep expert at that point.
Yeah.
Could be sleep apnea too.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that's helped. Oh, sorry, Amber.
Oh, I was just going to say, Chad, to your point about incremental changes, my coach liked to remind me that as we get older, it becomes more and more difficult to shift your circadian rhythm, which is why jet lag tends to get worse with age, not better.
Awesome.
It's amazing how that happens.
The thing that's helped me the most is, and I'm really bad at this. This might be a New Year's resolution I need to add on, but is not if I don't look at screens before I go to bed, like an hour before, I sleep much better. Not just the
surprisingly
quality, but
impactful.
also I'll sleep all the way through because I have a tendency to get up every morning, 5:30. I'm up and I'm going.
Even with the blue light removal, I still have I markedly worse sleep when I'm on the screen, and maybe that's not what's causing that issue, but
Yeah. So that's one thing that's helped me sleep longer. It also, I usually end up going to bed earlier then too. So yeah, that's a good way to do it. Find a really boring book and read that.
that's real too.
Yeah. Next one from Dan says, can you decide to be a climber or a sprinter? Or does it depend on your body type naturally? So
You can decide to pursue it.
yes, and that's the coolest part. So, Amber, you are no longer a pro. You
No.
don't have to be a domestique. You could be a climber, and then you could be a time trialist. You could be
She'd be a
anything.
triathlete,
She could be trash.
mountain biker.
She's gonna be a triathlete.
Yes.
Keep going with these. She's gonna be a triathlete.
So, but that's you aren't paid for a role, right?
Right.
And in this case, Dan, you're not paid to be any sort of rider, so you can absolutely be the sort of rider you want to be.
Train everything.
Yeah, when you train like a specific type of rider, you'll become like that version of yourself, and that's kind of the fun thing.
Good way to put it.
And you don't have to. Now, granted, you may not be the fastest rider in the world, your local area, whatever it may be. That doesn't matter. You probably improved your climbing if you focused on that, or you probably
and I
improved
think
your sprinting.
Even athletes who want to pursue their sport at a really, really high level, like if, I don't know, Dan, maybe like if you're 14 years old and you're just getting into cycling and you really want to be a pro, I would say train everything, because even when people have a genetic predisposition for specific strengths, it takes a long time to know that, and you can make so many gains just by training your sprinting technique, training those systems. So just, shoot for the gains, and if you have an aspiration to do something, train it.
This is the strange product of being so connected to the professional world and knowing how they train and being able to measure how we train against how they train. Cycling is unique. When you look at soccer, for example, kids don't know that much about how Lionel Messi is training right now.
Right.
So, but they know how Egan Bernal is training. And we get to see all his data.
Sure.
So we're so connected to that the pro world, any pointy end of any spear like that, it's a world of consequence and harsh realities where it's you are this or you are this, because we're talking the best of the best.
Right.
We have to remind ourselves that we are not at that pointy end of the spear, us amateurs, and there's so much wiggle room in terms of who we can become. you
Yeah.
know? And anybody can be a sprinter. You may not be the best sprinter, but
I like the way
can
you
still
put
work
it. You become your best version of that thing.
Yeah.
So don't look past anything but yourself.
I have a theory that everyone sucks at sprinting because, we know I suck at sprinting, right?
I
Yeah, you know
too.
it. but you know I suck.
Sure.
You're better than me.
Yeah.
And I don't ever train it, and yet I've beaten lots of people in sprints.
Yeah.
And I feel like no one goes out. They might like sprint with their friends some, but no one goes out, or very few people go out for focused, regular sprint technique building sessions.
I did.
Yeah.
Well, you're pro, right?
Yeah.
But how many like in general
Average folk
do that?
And this does not
They
count just chasing Strava segments. That's
They
not
throw
like,
it on the end of the ride or in like
Yeah.
a drop ride, but not the kind of thing that like Pete did on our video, where let's go out and this focus of this session is going to be sprinting. I'm going to build it up and work on all these sort of things and do these drills. And they're not doing that multiple times a week.
Right.
Right.
And I bet you do that compared with good positioning and a good like high FTP for the end of the race to be in the right position, not be cooked.
and you'll do well.
I bet you will destroy people, even if you're not a air quotes sprinter.
Exactly.
You'll beat people who are naturally explosive, but don't train, but don't do this. That's what I think. So I think you can be anything you want. Just what you said.
yeah.
Yep.
I think sprinting in particular is really, really trainable. But you have to take that time to focus.
It's the most technique driven out of all of cycling, where
Oh, yeah.
technique and a little bit of practice can really improve your sprint to beat people. And then also skill based on positioning at the end of the race. Because if you're in the wrong spot, you can have a great sprint. You just
Yeah, it's
too
really,
far.
there's a lot of moving parts with the
Yeah,
sprint. Yeah, absolutely. I guess you could probably say that for a lot of different things, but sprinting is definitely unique with that. Okay, the last one that we're going to cover here, and this will just kind of reinforce the things that we covered. This one says, I have an FTP of 255 and I want to increase it to 300 by the end of the year. That would be 4.25 watts per kilogram to 5 watts per kilogram, sitting at 60 kilogram rider. So do you guys think it's realistic? And how would you approach the training to achieve it? So this is like this is an example of a really tough question to answer, but a question that we get quite a lot, actually. Like a person basically says, like, I'm here, I want to be here. Is this possible?
Need some more info.
And you definitely, and not only some more info, but this is an example of you can set a goal to like get there, but you should definitely look at this as the most important thing is progress toward that goal.
Right.
And there is no like, okay, well, I'm planning on going to 5 watts per kilogram, so my training is going to be totally different than a person that's trying to improve from 2 to 2.5 watts per kilogram. It's not like everything changes and shifts, and it's just about nailing the workouts, being consistent with it, putting in
Same
the
principles at work.
work.
Yep.
Yeah, so sorry to give you kind of like a flat answer in that regard, but that's honestly the best way to look at it. You can totally put that numerical goal down there. You can absolutely do it. Just make sure that you're focusing on the steps to get there instead of just the end goal.
Chad, what kind of information would you want to answer this question?
First off, training history. I mean, if this is a brand new rider who's starting at 4.25, getting to 5 is probably really attainable. If this is someone who's been training for 20 years and is stuck at 4.25, 5 is probably out of the question. If it's
Age.
oh yeah, that was the other thing. That's it right there. I mean, if this is a 65-year-old man versus a 35-year-old man,
Or woman.
Yeah,
if you're a
we're talking watts
35-year-old
per
woman,
kg,
it
I
could
mean-
be. We talked about it. 5 watts per kilo is like world champ
well, in
level.
that case,
Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
want to know that she's basically world class and has seen evidence of that because 5 watts a kilogram is way up there.
And then I'd also want to see like just short-term volume. Like, what are you training at right now to get to 4.25? If you're doing that on 3 workouts a week, 3-hour workouts, probably a
possible.
pretty
Not
good
gonna
chance. And you're 22.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you're right now at 15 hours a week of structured training,
Mm-hmm.
just kind of Chad's point, and you're not increasing quickly, probably not going to have a chance. Or your lifestyle, you just say, I can only work out 3 times a
Well,
week.
that's the
Yeah.
thing too. If your training volume is limited, you can't train anymore. I wouldn't expect a big uptick in anything just by changing the composition of the training.
He's 17.
Oh,
Whoa.
Oh.
17.
2 years. He's
One thing to
This
keep
is
in mind,
suspenseful.
producer Tucker's typing this out. Keep in mind one thing too with like young age.
Here you go. Cool.
We did like power to weight with the junior team the high school team that I was coaching. Like basically everybody was like 4 watts per kilogram plus, right? Like kids have insane power to weight ratios.
Yeah, so right here he says he's 17, and this is a 2-year goal. So right now I like his odds, and I'd also want to know, how much have you trained up until now? Have you just jumped right into it and you're starting at 4.25, or have you been training racing bikes since you were 14?
Yep.
He's 132, and there could be some weight gain in these next couple years.
For sure.
That you could also be a faster rider. So if you gain some weight as you like finish out puberty, but your FTP increases, your watt kg stays the same, you will I can see what situation you would not be a faster rider.
Performance will
Yeah,
improve.
if he gains 10 pounds but increases, I don't know what the ratio is, his FTP by 20 watts or 30 watts, you could absolutely be a better rider.
Based
So
on-
don't worry about that as much.
Based
Yeah.
on minimal information, it looks good.
Yeah, it looks attainable for sure.
Do it.
Okay, I lied. There's going to be one more question. We get this one all the time. But body composition was mentioned a couple times today. I was wondering what type or brand of body composition scales the TR team prefers or any others that matter. I have the Garmin Index at home. I like it because it just syncs with Garmin Connect, and then I have all the information in one spot. But we have used the Tanita BF680W. We've said it enough now that it's in the head. That's a really cheap, well, relatively speaking. I think it's $49 or $50, somewhere around there on Amazon. Should be readily accessible to be able to get it. And that one works just as well as more expensive ones that we tried.
What's the Nokia? Do you know the model on that?
No, it's some Nokia one, but that syncs to my phone too, which I like.
Yep. Yeah. So there are ones that you can get that are wireless, but otherwise we've all had good results in terms of good data with that
Consistency.
cheap one, that BF680W.
Reliable.
So those are what we'd recommend. Thanks everybody for joining us. Happy New Year. It's an exciting start, and hopefully you've got some goals that are going to push you and make you a faster cyclist and triathlete this year. And hopefully we can help you with that. Head over to trainerroad.com, go to our YouTube channel. You can check out all the race analysis we do, blog.trainerroad.com, forum.trainerroad.com, all the supportive pieces to make those goals happen. And we'll talk to you all next week. Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.